I mean, we were outlaw.
Yeah.
They were the bad guys and we were the good guys, what we thought. It was a 13-point typical, about a 160 class buck. Well, that was a good deer and all, but it wasn't the one I was after. Swinging that rack, just boom, boom, just mowing that shrub oak out in that shorter shrub. And brush was flying off his rack, points were sticking everywhere. And I was like, it's a fucking moose, you know. I'd rattled up 28 bucks that morning.
Oh my God.
There was 13 bucks in a line, and he was at the rear, and he was huge. He was 26-inch spread deer with like 15-inch back tines. And I knew he'd go Boone and Crockett, but everybody in town knew that deer was there, and I thought, I'm going to get him before season even gets here this year. Get near enough to get a shot, and when I got there, could have killed him. I just said, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to wait till he rubs out, and I'm going to come back and get him then. I didn't want to shoot him in the velvet. He was too beautiful. And the deputy sheriff step out, throw down on him with, what looked like automatic weapons. Drop the gun! I'm just a hunter. Drop the gun! He had it up, getting ready to shoot in that direction. Well, and he pulled me over with 6 horns and capes. I had a spotlight screwed on the side of my gun. I had all that in the trunk of the car. And this deputy was so convinced that I was a drug runner, he tore that old Coupe de Ville Cadillac apart looking for dope. They got George within 10 minutes on his first ride. If I ever kill one legal, no one will probably ever believe it. I could probably have a truckload of game wardens with me when I shot it, and they'd still think somehow I fudged and posted. See, there's no honor among thieves. I can't do that. I'll probably never be able to shoot one that everybody believe I killed legal.
Yeah,
I've robbed myself of that.
Yeah.
And there's no honor for me now.
Hey guys, Christian Babcock here of The Hunter's Advantage. I wanted to give a little bit of backstory before we got into today's episode of the in-person interview of the infamous Prince of Poachers, Charles Beaty. Those of you guys that aren't familiar, Charles is one of the most infamous poachers ever. He has poached 116 deer off the world-famous King and Kennedy ranches in South Texas, and he did all of this over a 22-year span of not being caught. Charles these days is a redeemed man who's found faith in God, who's given up poaching, and we don't want you guys to think that we at Hunter's Advantage are advocates of poaching, but his stories are nothing short of incredible. We've got near-death experiences, run-ins with the law, all sorts of other crazy stories that Charles is going to share in this episode. But I want you guys to make sure and hit the subscribe button and turn bell notifications on before we get started, because we're going to have Charles back in after his second part of his book releases in December, and I don't want you guys to miss out on it. Now let's get into the video.
Well, everybody that's listening and watching, welcome back to another episode of the Hunter's Advantage podcast. Today I'm joined by Charles Beaty, the Prince of Poachers. We had you on, I think it's been almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And did on Apple and Spotify, did over 30,000 plays, and then 110,000, 112,000 now on YouTube. So it's one of the biggest episodes for us. And thanks for coming back and actually doing one in person. So
yeah, my pleasure.
So how's it going? How's the cancer treating you?
It's about history, but I've still got a surgery here in my solar plex. I'm waiting to find out a little more about the doctors, checking out the biopsies and stuff.
Yeah.
He wants to know everything he can before he sticks a knife to me.
How many surgeries have you had? And what kind of cancer do you have, by the way?
It's a squamous cell carcinoma. I've had them lay my navel open about 6 inches to the left side, and they took out of the pectoral muscle here. There was a stack of 6 carcinomas formed in it. Stepped in a line like a set of stairs. And that's all been removed, what was left of that after I poisoned it and killed a lot of it. But it seemed like it would never end, but I know the light at the end of the tunnel is finally going to come. It's, I got to walk away from that. That's held me back long enough.
How long have you had it?
About 18 years now.
Really?
So, yeah. It's growing in me my whole life, but it got real aggressive, 18 years ago, and just like it got me. But got the right doctor, and I'm on my way out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So I want to make it where people that have either seen the first episode or haven't seen it at all can understand kind of the story of you and to become the Prince of Poachers. So, I mean, just starting out, like, How'd you even get into hunting? Not even poaching. I mean, how'd that start out for you? You been hunting your whole life, or?
Yeah, being in taxidermy got me around the hunting and all. And my first boss actually took me to kill my first deer at 14 years old out in Brownwood. You know, shot a doe, and then I missed a buck, and I killed my first buck later with my first father-in-law in Louisiana, just, you know, sitting in a tree stand. And I knew very little about it for another year or so, and then got the job opportunity down in South Texas and took it. You know, and it was to get the big deer hunt invite on the King Ranch, so I moved down there. That professor seduced me with that. He goes, you know, come down there and mount all these quail for me that I sell in this furniture and stuff. And he said, I'll get you a hunt on the King Ranch. Well, that didn't work out. So I had to get one for myself, a bunch of them. But
yeah,
it led to the Kennedy Ranch a year later, and then there was no turning back.
What time frame? Like, how old were you when you moved down?
I was
to South
19
Texas?
years old when I moved to Kingsville. Yeah, I was married and had a newborn son, probably about 6 months old. And I just decided that was a big job opportunity because, you know, I was going to be making $25 an hour, and the hunting's what drew me. I said, I'm folding up 10. I quit the alpine taxidermy job I had and moved down to Kingsville. And I worked that job for 7 years, you know, and did all the hunting I could. I had to run the old lady off after about another year or two and pursue my career as an outlaw. There wasn't no more room for her in my life when I went crazy over them big deer. But anyway, she packed the boy up and left, got rid of her. But, you know, kind of like old Jimmy Johnson, when he wanted to become coach of the Dallas Cowboys, the first thing he did was get a divorce so he could dedicate to his career as the coach of the Cowboys. Yeah, I did about the same thing.
Well, so what year is this that you're moving down there? You're 19 years old?
76, 77, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I was rid of her within a year of getting down there.
Oh, my gosh. So for people that aren't familiar, that maybe aren't from Texas or this, so I think anyone that lives in the South understands what the King and Kennedy Ranch are. What are those for people that don't know what that is?
Yeah, from
What's the
Corpus
draw?
Christi south. You know, the King Ranch is everything south of Corpus along the coast. And then below there, even more in the southern part of Kennedy County, there's a little bigger stretch of the King Ranch. But on that east side of Highway 77 is the Kennedy Ranch below Rivera, you know. And it's a 440,000 acre total ranch, you know. I hunted the east side only. I never went on that west side. I've seen a map recently that showed me more about the west side than I knew. It's a narrow strip for a while, and it squares down in that bottom portion. It's a pretty good piece of property there. In fact, I talked to a lady a while back that bought a book. She's got some of that leased.
Really?
Oh, yeah, and there's plenty of nilgai over on that west side of Highway 77. They hunt them. They see a lot of them. They shoot a lot of them.
These are free range now, guys?
Yeah. But I've heard of them being shot as west as Freer, where the Muy Grande village is. I mean, you can't keep those things in a fence. I heard a story about a Squaw Mountain ranch up there in Jacksboro. They bought a nilgai bull, and they thought if they backed the trailer up to the fence close, when they opened the gate, that fence would turn him, and he would go down it instead of into it with any steam. He come out of that trailer, hit that fence, just made a hole look like a nilgai in that high fence, and they've never seen him since. straight into the free range, you know.
Yeah. How'd you end up finding out about all this land down in South Texas? Like,
just working in that big taxidermy, I met, you know, this landowner and that landowner and all the outlaws, and, you know, in no time at all, I heard the history of it all.
I was reading in some forums last night, and poaching in the Kennedy and King has been something that's happened for a long, long time. Like, I'd heard of people talking about shooting really big deer back in the early 60s on the ranches. Had you heard of anything like that?
Yeah, and I've heard stories that I don't know if they're true or not, but I've heard stories about outlaws being caught and roughed up by the ranch security and whatnot. And I don't know if it's true, but a guy told me one time back in the 50s, there was a couple of game wardens found hung on that high fence over there in that Canella division of King Ranch towards Ricardo. I don't know if that's true or not. I heard some crazy stories. It might have been just scare tactics they put out to, you know, cause a lot of attention to be, make a lot of people too intimidated to go in. Mm-hmm. Stories about people never came out. Yeah. Went in the ranch, disappeared. In fact, that was in Dick Bob Clayburg's day. What I heard was that the Highway Patrol came out, with their big search for some people that didn't come out. And they said, all right, the next time someone disappears in the ranch like that, we're going to take the whole thing away from you and give a quarter acre over to every Mexican in South Texas. I heard some crazy stories, when I first got down there. There's just no telling what's true and what ain't.
Yeah, I've been watching this show on Apple TV called Yellowstone, and they have like an 800,000 acre ranch in Montana, and they do some shady crap on that ranch. I guess if you have something of that magnitude, there's really no end to what you can do on it.
Right. Yeah, it's like old Jeff Stanfield said on that Big Honker. He said, I'd be more afraid of the cowboys catching me out in the ranch than the game wardens. And there's some truth to that back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they threatened me like that. They threatened they were going to stretch me between two cowboys and kick my guts out. And so I sent them back a message, and I said, well, if they do that, tell them to go ahead and kill me. Because I said, if they do that, if they stretch me and kick my guts out, and I live, I said, I'm going to go buy as many case boxes of 22 hollow points as I can carry. And I'm going to walk through the ranch at night and put one in the guts of every cow they got. I got mad. I didn't take them threatening my life like that. But the wise thing to do was, when I found the Kennedy, just hunt it. I left them looking for me hard in the King Ranch, after our little bout in words there. But they didn't have a chance to catch me as long as I wasn't there, did they?
That's fair. So what was your first experience with hunting these big ranches? How did all this get started? Like, I know a lot of people call it poaching, but you call it something different. It's outlaw hunting.
Yeah.
How did that get started?
Those local outlaws took me and jumped the fence first time. That broke the ice. Once my eyes were open to it, all fear was gone. Till they held that cattle round up on me in that grassland pasture. Just picked the wrong day to go in there. But it was probably a lesson well learned. It just kept me from getting caught center probably in that type of situation. But once I found the live oaks and stuff, my backyard got a lot bigger. It was my childhood dream started just busting wide open. I was like, there is a place on this planet that I can go and just be in the wild by myself, And, I just took to it like a spaceship going into orbit. I wasn't coming out of there. You couldn't move me then. Once I found that place, I wasn't going anywhere else. I was going to hunt it till I saw the fullness of it. Entirety. I wanted to search it all out, the whole thing. And I did.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, I never got bored there.
So you started hunting it when you were 19?
Yeah. I think I was almost 20 when my wife left. And then I got to hunting real serious then. Then I would start going in and staying for a week.
Yeah.
Deeper and deeper. And learning more of how the ranch was laid out. I learned the windmills, where to get water. I learned a lot of the brush layout. And, I could walk it in the dark. Years later, I knew that whole place, like the back of my hand in the pitch dark. After I took one guy, and one day he said, man, I'm tired of carrying these backpacks. Let's put them down and take a day off. I said, all right. So we put them down, hid them in some brush. And we made a big welter that day, and, when it got dark, we were 2 miles from the packs. And I had to bust about 4 bars of this brush, sand dunes groves on them in a line and to the northwest, And he said, you don't know where we're at, do you? And I said, yeah, we got one more of these brush bars to bust, and we'll be there. It'll be about 20 yards down, and we'll hit that little trail we went in on when we put them in there. And he goes, I got to see this. So we walked right to them. I said, there they are. And he goes, I don't believe it. He was telling a friend of mine about it afterwards, and he goes, how does he do that? How does he leave a backpack somewhere in the middle of that place and then walk back to it in the dark without a compass or anything? He said, I don't know how he does it, Larry. He said, but one thing I know, I saw him do it.
Yeah. Well, because I think it's important for people to understand that nowadays we've kind of electronified maps, and everyone's using OnX and HuntStand and all these apps, and you guys aren't using any of that. Are you using paper maps, or are you just out there walking around?
There was a time when we took paper maps, and old Big L, I called him, he's gone now, but he had this little laminated pocket-sized miniature map.
Yeah.
And he could see fence lines in the brush, and he knew exactly where he was by that when he was going by himself. Mm-hmm. But when we hunted together, I said, you don't need any of that when you're with me, and he saw that, you know.
Did you even use a compass or anything like that?
I had one, you know, but the only time I ever got turned around in there, I was on that 27-day hunt. It was raining cats and dogs for about 3 days in a row, and I was just disgusted with the rain. It wasn't cold, and I saw my tracks 3 times. I was walking in circles. The rain was pouring straight down. It wasn't cold, wasn't coming out of the north. It was just a downpour, a deluge, you might call it. And I started laughing when I hit my tracks the 3rd time, and I said, if the game wardens are tracking me now, they're dizzy by now. I said, this is going to be funny. So I walked off my trail, got in the brush, and watched my trail making a cup of coffee, warming back up. I was soaked to the bone marrow. And I didn't see anybody walk up on my trail, so I had that coffee, and then I had a direction from there, and I started my direction. I saw some good sign. I rattled up this big old downhill deer. He had big bases. He had a huge body, black deer. And his tines were rickety like arthritic fingers on an old granny, you know, just crooked shape, wiggle to the points, pencily. He wasn't any good, but like I told my buddy George when I come out, I said, I was so disgusted with the rain, I shot him anyway. And George started laughing. But time I got to him, and I wanted to go check him out, but it was raining so hard by the time I got to him, he'd moved on me as I shot, and I hit him a little back through the liver, and I didn't have much blood trail anyway, but I took a few steps up the blood trail and was watching it disappear in front of my own eyes from all the rain, and I just got real disgusted, and I said, hell with that deer, I'm going back to camp and get dry. Mm-hmm. So I went back to my Preta camp, dried out, you know, got stripped off and got dry and got in my sleep bag and got me warmed up. You can get cold even in a warm temperature if you're soaked.
Yeah.
You know, you soaked all day, you get cold to you. But, you know, I've seen some good weather, great weather, bad weather, and disgusting weather.
That was it all.
Yeah, I didn't want to hunt. I said, I'm going to let it let up. I'm going to see a change in the weather. And there's times I'd have to lay up for 2 or 3 days in the heat and let it pass. Because when it's getting real hot, you know it's fixed to change. You don't need your headset to tell you the weather. You know by that real strong heat to change. And then when it starts bucking out of the southwest, here it comes. You could bet on it and be there in 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah. One thing I want to touch on is, so what was the first buck that you actually shot at the ranch? I know you said you went hunting right before you turned 20, but what's the first deer that you shot on the ranch?
In the Kennedy Ranch?
Either ranch.
Well,
the first deer that you poached off either of those ranches, which one?
Yeah, well, I shot 3 or 4 bucks in that King Ranch grass country before that cattle roundup. They were just Plaque Mount 135 to 140 bucks. But when I went to the Kennedy, I shot one better than all of them on the first day with old Harry Riskin. And he was a heavier horn buck, a lot prettier. You know, he's certainly a step up the ladder. And within another year, I had shot Big John. I'd rattled up the scarecrow for George. Things started shifting into a whole nother level, you know. Once I figured out what time it was there, you know, you could cover so much more ground that it was inevitable. You were going to find a giant. If you kept moving and kept rattling new territory, they'll defend. But I shot a 153 2 hours before George killed that 178 scarecrow. I mean, after that, we never went downhill. We just kept shooting deer bigger and bigger and bigger, you know, every year.
Well, what's it like the first time you go in there and you shoot the first deer that you poach off one of these ranches? Were you guys nervous about it at all, or was it just something that was normal down there?
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
Me and George were so miserable, and it was frosty night again. The first 2 bucks we killed together, we built a fire at a windmill. We had the heads hanging in the windmill frame. It was just beautiful.
Yeah.
And you know, back then they weren't expecting someone to do something like that. I mean, it was about 11 miles off the highway, and that road that led back there was so grown over with grass we could tell nobody had been using it for a while. Now, he shot that buck running right up that bar ditch. And so we just didn't figure anybody would be coming back there that night. And so we camped right on that windmill.
And you guys are shooting these deer with
30-06 that trip.
Yeah, but you're not using a suppressor. You're not doing anything
Nothing
like that.
to silence the shots back then.
And that's because purely of how vast the land is. You're not even worried about people rolling up on you. And if you are, you're confident in your ability to get away.
So thick, we felt like we could run and get away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at that point, I hadn't been bothered with the helicopters. But that's a whole nother game when that starts going down,
So you started off at the King, and why'd you quit hunting the King?
Well, that open country's so dangerous. It's risky.
Why is that?
Well, you can't move around without maybe someone seeing you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a cowboy could see you from a mile or a mile and a half away and run you down on a horse.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get away once they've got you spotted in that open country. There's nowhere to hide. You don't want to put yourself in that position. I was in it that one time in that cactus. I didn't want to go back into a situation like that again.
So how many times did you hunt the King before you said, screw that and all this open stuff?
I've
I'm
been
moving
there
to
4 or 5 times.
Okay, so you killed several bucks off that
Oh,
place.
yeah, I killed 4 bucks, I think, out of there. In the 135 to 140 something class.
And then you started moving over to the Kennedy. How long did you only hunt it for a single season, or how many seasons did you hunt the King?
Just I think a season the next year in the fall was when I went back after that real big deer. And in October is when they pinned me down in that cactus.
At the King?
Yeah. See, there's stuff I hadn't told on a podcast that's in the book. I'd seen that buck in the velvet in August and passed him. There was 13 bucks in a line, and he was at the rear, and he was huge. He was 26-inch spread deer with like 15-inch back tines. And I knew he'd go Boone and Crockett, but everybody in town knew that deer was there, and I thought, I'm going to get him before season even gets here this year.
Yeah, in velvet or before or
he
after
was in
velvet?
the velvet.
Yeah.
And I'd crawled and got stickers all in my arms to get near enough to get a shot. And when I got there, could have killed him. I just said, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to wait till he rubs out, and I'm going to come back and get him then. I didn't want to shoot him in the velvet. He was too beautiful. I had him at 200 yards with a 243. So I go back, and I went on a Monday because I figured nobody'd expect someone to be hunting during the week. I figure everybody's working. No, They were running the cattle out of that particular pasture that morning. They were pulling the calves out of there. And I mean, they like to got me, You've heard the story, but they pinned me in that cactus about 4 hours before I was willing to, got completely quiet a couple of hours before I got up and made a break and run out of there.
When they pinned you down in the cactus, you confirmed that they actually saw you.
No, they did not see me.
They didn't see
They
you.
never saw me. If they saw me, they'd had me.
Yeah.
They never saw me. I saw them first. There was a cowboy and one horse come over the swell this way and one come over this way. I could hear them hooting and hollering and whistling. And as soon as they started down that draw and I saw them, I look up and there's a helicopter coming right at me, right on the ground. And I just wheeled and dove into that fork in that cactus.
Yeah.
And buried up in it and stayed there. But, man, they went right by me. They turned, came straight at me. And the closer they got, the more convinced I was they'd seen me and that they were fixing to just go, whoa, and pull up to a stop right on me. Come out of there, and have guns on me.
Yeah.
They blew right by me, just thunderous sound of them horse hooves, and I could hear the dirt falling off them hoofs and hitting the ground. And I just knew they were pulling to a stop any second, but they just went right on by me.
How close do you think they were to you?
I could have spit on them. They could have spit on me. They were right on each side of that cactus from me. It was just this one big lone pile of cactus. And the cactus pile was a little less than the size of this room.
Not very big.
No.
Yeah.
There's barely enough for me to hide in.
Yeah.
I was using it for a deer blind. I got there. I got at it before daylight, and I said, I'm going to hold by this where I can stay hid from the deer and make a move from it and crawl to the deer to get a shot. And then it turned out that saved me. If I hadn't been by the cactus when they came over them hills, I'd had it. They'd seen me.
So that was that your last straw on the King?
That was it. I was done, except me and George did hit it at night. And that's another story on the other side of the highway.
Yeah. Is most of the deer you're shooting or during the day? You're not spotlighting most of these deer. Are you?
Yeah, we did some night hunting, but and it's fun. It's got its own twist. But I liked seeing the deer coming in and the drama play out. I love seeing them run in. I like seeing them come in several at a time and square off at each other. And seen some fights, and I've seen them close. I've seen some rough fights close, but it's 10 times the action in broad daylight. And you got a better assessment of which one you want to shoot. You can judge him better. When you're talking about, 2 or 3 different deer that are all over 160 inches. You got to weigh them against each other. You go, well, that one's got this, but he ain't got the, you got to pit them against one another and decide if you want to shoot any of the 2 or 3. I've seen 2 or 3 really big deer at the same time.
Yeah, and only shot one of them. But
when it's an automatic, you're gonna kill it monster. That's usually a deer all by himself.
Yeah,
he's done whooped everything off of it. He's got that's his territory. That's like my freak. He came in bull of the woods, done run everything out of there. There was no other deer near there.
Yeah,
he was guarding this short shrub, little old circle, about 80-yard circle, and he was had his rubs all the way around the edge of that.
Yeah.
It was out in a big, vast area of live oak. But any kind of a small, short shrub visibility area, they'll get on that and guard it.
Really?
Yeah.
They that's their territory.
That's it. That's home sweet home. That's where they were born. Likely they've lived there their whole life, And they feel like that's their house.
Yeah.
They guard it. It'd be like if a guy kicked in your door and came in your house, you pick up a gun and start shooting. That's the way they are, guarding their home.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe you could tell the story of the freak. What made that deer so special?
The character, he had it all. I actually prayed for that deer that morning. I described him to a T. I said, I want a heavy horn buck with double handlebars, some freak points, knobby texture, chocolate horns. If I'd have wrote it down on a list to Santa Claus, exactly what I asked for. But I'd been able to walk real quiet for about 80 yards to enter about the center of that little short shrub area. And then I just decided to take a right turn and get in this 18-foot tall live oak on an edge there. And as I was coming in, I was poking my ears with twigs, and so I turned my head, and when I turned my head to keep from getting my ear poked, I saw this big old gnarly heavy rub. That rub was just bushy, pretty good sized live oak, the trunk only about 6 inches in diameter. And I knew I was right in the big deer's bedroom. And so, boy, I started getting quiet as I could. I tiptoed on in and got down probably about 8, 10 yards in. And I took a knee and eased my backpack off, knocked an arrow on my bow. I had no compound bow then. I was shooting aluminum arrows. I just had a sight pin rack. I didn't use a peep then. I just closed one eye and one pin him. It's a lot quicker way to get your aim. You just get a good standard lock on your corner of your jaw.
Yeah, good anchor point.
Good anchor. So I picked up the horns and I always kept my gun close enough to reach in case I needed it. And I hit the horns after I'd rubbed a little bit. I hit the horns just please. And as soon as I hit the horns, I heard that buck coming immediately. I think rubbing had pulled him. I think he pulled on up. I didn't hear him, but I think he walked up quietly on a trail because he was so close when I first heard the sound. It was incredibly close. And I just started, as soon as I went coosh with the horns, I heard coosh, coosh, and I thought he was leaping 20-yard bounds right at me. When I saw him, he wasn't, but I'd already come to full draw. I thought he was going to leap in that bigger live oak right in my face, and I just dumping air down his chest about 8 yards or less. And when I saw him, he wasn't coming to me. He was coming across. And as he was coming across, he was just swinging that rack, just just mowing that shrub oak out in that shorter shrub. And brush was flying off his rack. Points were sticking everywhere. And I was like, it's a fucking moose, And so I knew he went on around behind some heavy, thick edge there, and I knew I had to put the bow down, get the gun. I wasn't going to have a bow shot. I couldn't have run an arrow through all that thick edge. I couldn't see him anymore. He got behind it. And so when he comes to a stop, he's about to win me is what was really pressing at the moment. I was like, he's going to win me any second. I'm going to lose him. But when I started setting down that bow, I think he heard that aluminum arrow going ding, 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 ding. I got it set down. I picked my gun up, put it on my shoulder, and he's just standing there just all pumped up. And seconds turned into minutes, and I was like, I got to do something. I got to make something happen. I'm going to blow this. He's going to take a few steps and win me. So I put the gun down on my leg and reached behind me and grabbed one rattling horn and just threw it on the other. And when I did, he came. I knew he'd come or go. I figured I might take a snapshot over here in that one opening if he left. So I was throwing the gun back up quick to get on him, do what I had to do. Boy, he came. Right through that wall of brush, and he was standing straight at me then. He just hit the brakes when he saw me. I just broke his neck. His chin hit the ground first. I ran up there. I couldn't even move him. I had to turn around and put his head between my legs and grab both bases and just start heaving and dragging, trying to get him out of that thick brush where I could roll him over to cape him off. And old Tom East, we'd heard he'd been riding a donkey in that thick brush. I could hear this donkey braying. And I mean, I set a record on how fast I've ever caped one off. And I got moving, got out of there, and, I've told this story before. It was later in that afternoon. I'd actually ran across George's tracks. Thought I'm going to catch up with George and show him this deer and tell him I've heard that donkey and get us out of this area. And I've lost him in some thick stuff, and I said, I just got to book and get out of here. So I picked up the pace and ran somewhat, jogged, for a while. And I got way down a couple miles in the South Finger, and then I come back up towards this barn windmill, and I was in this beautiful area, and I couldn't resist. I go, I got to rattle here. And I did. It was late afternoon. The wind had shifted back. It was 11 o'clock in the morning when I killed the freak. I'd rattled up $28 that morning.
Oh, my God.
That shows you how many deer on a frosty morning. It was December the 5th or 4th. Anyway, I'm sitting there and I rattled once, and I'd rattled up $28 that morning.
Oh, my God.
That shows you how many deer on a frosty morning. It was December the 5th or 4th. Anyway, I'm sitting there and I rattled once, and I waited, and I was about to rattle again, and I heard this metal-on-metal jingle right behind me, like 20 yards behind me. Boy, I turned an ear to it. Sounded like the spurs or metalworks on the saddle. I think it might have been the bit in the horse's mouth. I got up and I tippy-toed. I just grabbed this and that and was just, backpack on one shoulder, and I tippy-toed out of there as quiet as I could, never look back. But they had apparently called in the troops. Here come a bunch of horse riders in trailers, and they'd let them out, and they were just pilfering around in that area trying to pick up tracks and all. But that was a real close call, real close.
How big was the freak?
He's 171, and he had 15 scoreable points, 21 points total. But tailor-made. I mean, if God's ever answered any deer hunter's prayer for a description on a buck he wanted to kill, he did that day, because that was exactly what I asked for, and that was exactly what I got. And the way I killed him, the rattling him up point blank like that, I told some friends of mine, I said, that the Oscar went to that one. That was the Academy Award winner right there. His performance was unequal. I've never seen one do that before.
Yeah.
Not like that. He was full of aggression, He was letting everybody know, you're in my territory and I'm fixing to kick your ass. And that's what he intended to do. Life was great for him till he ran into my 7mm 08.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big misconceptions I see people when they talk about your book or they talk about the podcast episodes you've done is I think a lot of people think you guys are killing all these deer at night. I don't think they realize how because when we think of poachers, we think of people shooting deer out of a truck with a spotlight. And what you guys are doing is actually you're out there rattling bucks up. You're actually hunting, and the only thing that's wrong about it is it's someone else's land.
Yeah, no permission.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, George was doing a lot of night hunting when I met him. He'd get dropped off on the King Ranch late after getting drunk and walk around with a 5-cell flashlight and shoot bucks and cut their heads off, rattling them up at night on 141 there in the King Ranch. He'd killed 15 bucks just that fall before I met him. I mean, they were all 150, 55-inch deer, some with 23-inch spreads and big old heavy bases. And when we parted for that season and I decided to come back up to Fort Worth for the summer and chase the girls, he threw 15 racks in a dumpster. He had them in my apartment. He just broke them in half, and we went out there laughing and threw those racks in the dumpster at my apartments and drove off.
Gosh dang.
I mean, one man's ceiling is another man's throne. George had killed deer like that every year his whole life. Mm-hmm. They didn't mean much to him.
Yeah.
He was still looking for those 180-plus bucks, and he found them later.
What was you all's main method for getting all these bucks? I know, you were talking about in the book, a lot of your stories are rattling bucks up. Yeah. And, and where we hunt a lot of the time, you're thinking about when you're rattling bucks up, sometimes they respond to that, but the way they respond to you guys just makes it sound like they're 100% pure wild, never seen a person.
Yeah, there's a lot to that, but I think it's the game. You get deer that have been around populations of people and pressure, and they're weary. Those deer down there are game as a fighting cock.
Yeah.
They don't know any fear. It's all about, survival of the species. Now, they're just game roosters. Get in their territory and rattle them up, and they come in there and see each other. They fight in front of you. They're just game as a rooster. That's the only way I know to describe them. Game as a fighting cock.
How'd you get started on the rattling thing? Was that something that all your
Everybody
outlaw
down
buddies
there
were?
did it.
They were like rattling.
Everybody been doing that for years down there.
Yeah.
Man, because it was so successful. If you went, you took rattling horns. It was just the way everybody hunted.
Yeah, there wasn't no sitting up on a hill spotting stock.
There wasn't no thrill to sit in a stand and shoot something. That was like assassination. We didn't, shooting something off a feeder like that, we just called that assassinating one. We wanted to go out there and play the game and outwit him, and see him fooled.
Yeah.
You fool one. There's nothing better than to fool one, have him be point blank looking you in the eyes at 4 or 5 yards before he realized you were even there, and he sees you laying down there against that backpack, and he's all eyes right on you and stuff, and he just freezes for a second, and every hair on him standing up straight up, and then he starts shaking and quivering, and every hair on him starts laying down till it's slick as a baby's butt, and then pow!
Yeah.
There's nothing like that. You get to see it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the experience of killing them deer, rattling them up. There's nothing like it. Now, I don't know what it's like to sit in a stand and just shoot one. I'd be bored to tears sitting there waiting.
Yeah, well, I don't think most people will ever experience what you guys probably experienced with.
It ruined us. Spoiled rotten. I mean, run. Like I told this first podcast I was on with the honker, I said, I'm ruined. What is there for me now? I guess go to Canada, go to other states, start hunting bears.
Yeah. Well, you still have your hunting license and everything, right?
Yeah.
What is there for?
I'm not a convicted felon.
Yeah.
No, it was a felony the next year after I quit. After I was caught and quit in 1999 in Texas, it became a felony. Mm-hmm. It was time to turn in my towel.
Is that ultimately why you quit doing it, is because of the felony?
Well, I'd already went through a lot of spiritual things that had changed my mind about it and all, but I'd also gone through that bad divorce and had my son taken from me, and I was angry with the state, and I kind of had to simmer over that. I had to kind of call a truce, and the real truce comes in part two because I get to tell what happened. I get to, tell my side of the story. I'm very angry at the state of Texas. A judge on the People's Court, Judge Pirro, she's my hero. She told one lady there in court that was taking her child away from her husband, somehow had done that. And she said, whatever gave you the idea that you could take your child's father away from him? She's my hero. I'd like to see my ex stand trial in front of her.
Yeah.
For all the perjury and forgery to steal custody. I'd like to see her answer to Judge Pirro.
Yeah, she sounds like a rock star.
Yeah, she's my hero.
So I think a lot of people aren't going to stand or understand how wild and western you guys really got. How far back in these ranches were you getting before you even started hunting? How are you avoiding the pressure that's on these ranches?
Yeah, I didn't like to start hunting before I was 12 miles deep, at least 4 miles past the backside of the Riskin Ranch where I started doing my hunting. I'd like to get at least 4 miles east of there and then hunt south and then hunt 17, 20, 22 miles deep. I'd make a big cannonball loop. But I've walked from Sarita at the highway all the way back 17 miles deep and hunted for days and then walked all the way back out. You'd be surprised how far you can walk hunting if you just put your feet to it and go.
Yeah.
When you love deer hunting as much as I did, sky was the limit. It never entered into my mind, the work part of it. It was play. I've always been guilty of playing a lot harder than I was willing to work.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it.
Yeah, I think that's true for everybody.
At least we'd like to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll fish harder, hunt harder than we'll ever want to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So how big is one of these ranches when you're 22 miles deep into one? How much further you got to go to get to the other side? I
could have gone probably another 4 miles at one point, and I'd had my feet wet in the Laguna Madre or Coastal Canal. I mean, I almost got to that shoreline out there. And at a point further south, it dips in, to the west, the water. Yeah. And I could have reached, I was above that. I was due north of that. I could have went due south and hit water, There was times we hunted the brush south. It was the Telephone and Beretta pasture, and they're in southern Kennedy Ranch. And George, one time, he hunted the furthest east. He got back there. He stayed 7 days. I got to tell that story. I need to branch into telling more about George.
Yeah. Who is George?
George Moore was my outlaw hunting buddy.
Is he the one that got you into it?
Yeah, no, he was already well into it, but I was too. But then we partnered up. Okay. So anyway, me and my brother were going in on a hunt, and George went in on a hunt the same night. But what he did was he had Exxon drilling rig information. He knew where new wells were. So he calls, this is one of the funniest stories he's ever told me, and it's what he did. He calls a vacuum truck to suck that drilling mud out of them pits, where they can transport it out to disposal. And he had a plan to be at the bump gate about 6 miles deep. And when that vacuum truck came the first night, he was sitting there waiting, but he wasn't on the right side of the gate. He was on the wrong side. And when it went through that big snap gate, instead of using the push gate, the bump gate, they closed that thing, and he waited till that guy got to the cab that was working the gate, and he made a dash over the fence, and they took off so fast he couldn't catch the vacuum truck. So what he did, he went back to the highway, hitchhiked in, called another vacuum company, and ordered another truck out there. He knew how things worked on the rigs. Used a fake name, told him the name of the rig that was in progress drilling. Bring me another vacuum truck out, so-and-so, I'm the foreman, so-and-so. He just lied to him. Well, here comes another vacuum truck at midnight. And there again, this time he's on the right side of the fence, the east side, and he's up in the brush. When they start pulling off, he jumps up on that back of that vacuum truck, and he rides about 15 miles deep all the way to that east coast. Okay. There's a straightaway all of a sudden when the road quits winding, and he knew he'd hit that last curve. Well, they were balls to the walls. They started punching it, and when they hit that straightaway, he knew he had to bail. So he bails off the back of that vacuum truck, backpack, gun, and all, and just flips and flops and rolls all in the ditch. He gets up and goes south to the brush to the Beretta pasture. And he stayed in there 7 days and killed 13 bucks. He said, I know I shot 13. He took a 22 Hornet and he took 29 shells, but he came home with no shells. He had to shoot some of them there a couple of times to kill them, but he said he brought 3 out. But he had a 24-inch spread 8-point. He had a big old heavy 10-point with a fork, and he had a 20-point buck with about a 21 2-inch spread. I've got pictures of them. But he had left so many deer laying dead during them 7 days that a week later, another friend of mine came from Fort Worth and went back there and hunted that same area. And he got scared because he saw all of George's back and forth footprints in every direction up and down fence lines. And he was scared, so he got out of there. Buzzards all over all these dead deer. And he said the buzzards were so fat they couldn't fly. He said, but they didn't need to. All they had to do was hop from carcass to carcass. Oh boy. Oh, George. He did that because he said I was never going back. That I went there that one time to see that depth of it in that area of the brush. And he spent every night in a cabin, an old line shack back there. And so he'd approach it at dark, see if anything was cooking, anybody driving around and check for tracks. And he said he was just about to go inside it to camp in that cabin that night, and he heard this big bang, and it scared the hell out of him. It sounded kind of a gun going off. And he said then he heard splash, and he looked, and this owl, a barn owl, had flown into this windmill and then just folded right into the tank, the overflow tank. He said that scared the shit out of me. But he said once I saw what it was, I went in there and slept like a baby.
Yeah. I mean, how is he killing deer with a 22 Hornet? Where's he
rattling them up at 20 yards, just shooting them in the Adam's apple with a horn. I'll just drop them and kick. He killed 3 in one rattle. He had 3 good bucks come up within 20 to 30 yards of him and broke all 3 of them's neck. He said they were laying dead within 20 yards of each other.
Really?
Yeah, George was crazy. He did stuff that I wouldn't do. He's wilder than hell. George had a grudge with the ranch.
Yeah.
They caught him so many times growing up as a child, young boy, teenager. And they knew one time they jumped him and 2 buddies, and he'd left his wallet laying there where they were resting and sleeping. And they just spotted them driving right by them in a thick edge, and the truck backed up. They took off running. Well, they left George's wallet laying there, and it was old Butch Thompson, King Ranch Security. He called him a day or two later, and he goes, "Buddy, come on over to the courthouse and pick up your wallet." He said, "I almost got you, didn't I?" And he said, "I don't know who stole that wallet out of my truck, but I figured it'd show up somewhere." And he goes, "Come get your damn wallet, George."
Yeah.
But it was a joke back then.
Yeah.
It was a cat and mouse game. Now they'll hang you. They'll take your gun, truck, put you in prison. You know, the good old days are gone.
Yeah.
But George grew up in those days. I don't know how many times he'd been caught. He used aliases over in the Jim Hogg Robert East Ranch and got away with it.
Really?
I mean, he went to jail there and he used a different name, and they booked him under a false name. You know. You know, he's dead now. I can tell whatever I want about him, you know, and he'd want me to do that. There's no shame in his game either. He was a proud outlaw. And when these buddies of mine went in with him, he took a guy. My other buddy Dennis took his son, and his son killed this 230-inch double drop buck. When they came out, I was in on my 27-day hunt. I didn't find out about that deer for a month, but when they came out, George was so angry from being caught the year before, 2 years before, and the stuff he said in confidence to him, they used against him in court to make him look bad, make the judge go harder on him. Well, he was mad about that. So he spread the word. He said, "I want him to know I was on the hunt that big deer was killed on." And so by the time I got out, it was buzzing like a saw from South Texas to Denton. They went up there and pulled that little kid out of school and arrested him and took him down and interrogated him. The game wardens tried to pressure tactic the kid without his parents being present, which is illegal. You know, he was 13 years old. They pulled him out of class. I mean, there was stuff the game wardens did. It's questionable, the legality and all. But they couldn't find the deer, so they didn't have a case.
Yeah.
But they filed on him anyway. I mean, there's some things about Parks and Wildlife I don't understand. If you don't have a case, why file? I mean, Ronnie Brooks was a game warden up there in Wise County, then out Throckmorton. And Ronnie would catch you like that. It was questionable. And he'd laugh, and he'd say, "I almost got you, didn't I?" He never would take you to jail or write you a ticket till he had you, dead to rights. Everybody respected Ronnie for that. They knew he was a fair game warden. If he caught you, he'd burn you. But he wouldn't play games and break the law and bend the law to make a case that he knew wasn't going to hold water in court.
Yeah.
Ronnie wouldn't do that, you know. Everybody admired him for that. Now, I wish we could say that about all game wardens, that they had the integrity that they're supposed to have, that they expect and want us to have. And it's a two-way street. It ought to go both ways. You know, you'll find that if you get a warning on a ticket from a cop, you'll slow down.
Yeah.
You won't get mad and say, "He caught me, but he won't catch me next time," and just keep on speeding. I've always, you know, given a lot more respect towards officers that understood, well, you weren't going at 7 miles an hour. Pay a little more attention. That carries a lot of weight with people. The way Mike Fain treated me with respect and dignity when they caught me was worth a fortune. What he did was genius. He knew not to mistreat me. It wouldn't do any good. It just turned me real bitter. And so he handled me with care, you might say, with respect. And I respected him for it. That's one of the reasons I quit. I said, finally, I've got my dignity back. I can quit now. I can quit being angry. I can quit being hostile towards them and taking it out on the deer and the game wardens. It's not their fault what happened to me. And it was how I laid it to rest. You know, but a lot of these young wardens need to take, you know, some lessons from that. I know Mike was a veteran game warden. He knew how to handle things better than rookies and stuff. But a lot of these rookies need to learn that, you know, if they're fair and treat people with respect instead of going around with this bad attitude like everybody's guilty of something. Well, I know y'all done something here. When I find it out, I'm going to get you. You know, that's all nonsense. That's just childish behavior. You know, if they come on as a man and treat you with respect, you get respect back. And we get more respect for the game laws then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Makes you want to do right. You know, if I ever kill one legal, No one will probably ever believe it. You know, I could probably have a truckload of game wardens with me when I shot it, and they'd still think somehow I fudged and posted. See, there's no honor among thieves. I can't do that. I'll probably never be able to shoot one that everybody believe I killed legal.
Yeah,
I've robbed myself of that.
Yeah.
And there's no honor for me now. And I did kill a moose legal, you know, whether they believe that or not. But, you know, that's like I'm saying, I can do it legal, and I still probably won't get any credit. Because they know my past.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a branded man now. So, you know, whatever.
You talked about taking it out on the deer. Isn't that one of the reasons you guys started killing as many as you did? Because you're supposed to be invited out to the King Ranch to hunt, or the Kennedy, I'm not sure which one. And you guys started doing it illegally because of all the bureaucracy and all the people that wouldn't let you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was the age-old Robin Hood mentality. We're like, well, they won't let us go, and we'll go anyway.
Did you guys feel like you had some right to go because of all the things you'd been promised?
Well, the ranch never promised me nothing.
Yeah. Who was it that told you they were going to get you?
This professor, then a university marketing management professor, and it didn't work out. It's too much of a corrupt political, you know, tyranny.
Yeah.
That's what I call it. I mean, mutiny on the bounty or something. That game warden lady, the lady taxidermist that was married to the game warden, that was as corrupt a ring as you could form with the ranch. They bowed to her and him because he was a game warden. Well, that's official oppression, as far as I'm concerned. You know, an officer of the law shouldn't be able to use their badge for any kind of persuasion of any sort. You know, they shouldn't. They can't go to school and tell the teacher, you got to pass my kid, I'm a cop, I'm a game warden. You can't use that against the public or for political gain, influence. And that's what we saw going on. And then, of all things, he shoots this deer in the refuge where no one was supposed to hunt that refuge. And he killed this beautiful monster buck, and then it got out that he'd shot this big buck in there, and the townspeople were buzzing like a saw. They go, oh no, that's not happening down here, and they got him fired.
The game warden?
Yeah, they got him dismissed from the state, and then the ranch just spit in their face with it. They hired him private security. They
Really?
liked him. See what I mean? Talk about corruption in the highest level. Here you got a game warden at the state. They had to fire him. They had to let him go. He did wrong. And then the ranch just buddies on up to him. You know, that's hypocrisy. So that was what me and George hated about it, you know. And it was like they wanted to control other people's lives with jobs, you know what I'm saying? If you did anything wrong in Kingsville, you were out. The ranch could get your job. They could, you know, lean on your boss and stuff and make you get fired. They could take your job in a lot of cases. We heard of it. We didn't like that either. You know, they're bullying around the peasants, they called them. That's what they thought they were. They thought everybody but them was just peasants. The King Ranch had an arrogance to it, you know. You know, I don't know what else to say about it. We had a way of justifying what we did, you know, in our minds. It didn't make it right, but we looked at it. You know, I mean, we were outlaw.
Yeah.
They were the bad guys, and we were the good guys, what we thought.
Yeah. I mean, was there ever a time, you know, where you and George are hunting the ranch that you guys ran into any other poachers or that are hunting it at the same time as you guys? Or did you guys have pretty much free reign?
I've seen drug runners, but I never saw other hunters. But, you know, one night, I'll tell this story. I was bringing two guys from Mexico with me. I'd moved to Mexico City for 3 years, and I'd been down there and met some people. And I met this man that owned a game ranch at Tampico, Mexico, by Lake Guerrero. And he came, and his foreman, Bernardo, came, and they made a hunt with me. And we didn't get about 5 miles deep, and I'd walk. One of my tricks was walk this old down fence line. It was just post. The wire had done rotted and busted loose in it. And we see a flashlight working, and it's clearly another outlaw hunter coming off the main road, coming up in there to settle down in the woods and wait for it to break daylight. And I just stopped him, and we watched him. And then when he came to a stop, you know, we just circled around without turning on any lights and just went around him. But that was the only time I can remember ever walking up on another poacher in the Kennedy Ranch.
What about drug runners? I mean, what did you see then?
I saw 6 of them carrying backpacks full of dope.
Really?
Yeah, about 11 miles off the highway. due north. You know, they knew where they were going. I think I might even know the guy at that time. I think I knew the guy they were going to meet up with to haul it on out of there.
How did you go so long? You know, this was the span that you hunted at 26 years?
22.
22 years. Okay,
Yeah.
22 years. And that's amazing, especially with all these people. You said coming up to your taxidermy shop knowing that you're doing these things. What was your main strategy for like avoiding detection? Like how did you make sure that people didn't know or couldn't find you?
Well, I'd go in the middle of the night and mile after mile after mile on my way to be dropped off. It's solid brush, and then I had a trick where I'd get dropped off south of there in this open grassland. But I would think every time I went, I said, I'm sure glad I'm the outlaw and not the game one's trying to catch me. I'd look at the odds, and I'd say this is a shot in the dark for them to ever encounter me in the only location that they can, which is while I'm on the road trying to drop off or pick up. That was when I was vulnerable. But even then, I'd think of it as I passed those last 10 or 15 miles. I'd go, there ain't a way they can ever encounter me on the drop-off, and it's about as, less likely on the pickup. Because I'm out there watching heads up, seeing anything going on when they'd come, close to getting me there. And yet they did once. But the odds are so against them, it's a bummer. It's like, I wouldn't want to be a game warden. Tough job. A lot of long hours, bored, trying to find somebody that's a shot in the dark to even locate and encounter. They got a hard job to try to catch a walk-in hunter. I'm sure some of it still goes on.
Yeah.
Them old locals that are raised down there, and they've got close friends that'll drop them off and pick them up. But that's just that the odds are so in the favor of the outlaw. That's how I got away with it so long. I had the odds in my favor. But people do get caught on their first try too.
That's true.
It happens.
Who were you having drop you off, and how did that work? How'd you coordinate the pickup? How'd you know how many days you had been in there?
Yeah, it was all predetermined.
Really?
I had this guy that was a genius. He worked on all the jet engines out there at the Naval Air Base. Mm-hmm. He was Hawaiian from Hawaii. His name was Reggie. Reggie was a wizard. And he'd been pecked on and pulled over sometimes. But even then, he'd outsmart him. He'd go back. We knew that if he was any heat on him, he'd be 2 more hours getting back down there.
Yeah.
And the one time he got pecked on and pulled over, he just went back, got another vehicle, came back 2 hours later, just repeat step one, You got your man on the road's got to be as good or better than the guy in the brush.
I'd say better.
To connect.
Yeah.
And if something happens, he's got to deal with it. If he gets pecked, he's got to know what to do and then deal with it and come back, make a second run to pick you up.
You guys would agree on a plan beforehand. You'd say, I'm going to hunt this many
we
days.
Time to the minute. I actually would have Reggie just beep his horn gently as he passed southbound. So it didn't matter if it was raining or foggy. I'd be looking at my watch, and to the minute, I'd know he was fixing to be there. Mm-hmm. And then I'd see a car going southbound, and I'd listen up to it, turn my ear towards it, and then beep. I'd go, there he is. He'd go down, sit in this litter barrel about 3 miles south of there, and just stay lights out there till the traffic cleared. And he'd try to do it in about 3 minutes, and then he'd be northbound and show up in a total of 5 or 6 minutes from when he beeped. And boy, when he came back, he'd be on the minute. And he'd just pull up right on the mark, and I'd load. It was that simple. It was 5 or 6 seconds they had to catch that going on. And if it was fog, I kind of pat myself on the back late season when you could do this. It wasn't no supernatural power I had, but I knew the season. And late on into January, them cool nights, after a warm day, it would fog about 1 to 1:30, and I would tease my friends when I'd have them with me, and I'd say, now fog, Lord. And they'd say, oh, you can't call down fog. And I'd say, watch. In about 30 minutes, this heavy fog would fall and settle into the area. Yeah. And then you could barely see the cars from 400 yards off the highway going up and down it. Mm-hmm. I said, all right, now we got about 10 minutes. It's time to move to the fence.
Yeah.
You'd come to the fence from 400 yards back, that last 5 minutes. So I stayed clear of the road. See, that's one of the reasons I was never caught before.
Were you not worried about all the heads and the skull caps and all the stuff that you got in the truck driving back up to Fort Worth?
Nah.
Why not?
Because the tag's a carcass tag.
So you tag it as a legal deer.
Yeah, coming in part 2, I get stopped in Carn City, north of a town called Kennedy, below Seguin, another hour and 15, 20 minutes. And he pulled me over with 6 horns and capes. I had a spotlight screwed on the side of my gun. I had all that in the trunk of the car. And this deputy was so convinced that I was a drug runner, he tore that old Coupe de Ville Cadillac apart looking for dope. And I literally bluffed him. I bluffed him right through there. I mean, game wardens would have held a banquet in his honor for catching me. But he didn't know what he had or who he had. My name meant nothing to him.
Yeah.
And he said, "Are you sure all these deer are legal?" And I said, "Just get the game warden up here. I'm in a hurry. I got a long way to go." I said, "The tag's a carcass tag. I've already told you." I said, "It remains with the carcass. The meat's back being processed at the deer processor in Corpus Christi." "Well, okay, if you say so." I said, "Well, if you're still in doubt, call the game warden. I just want to get loose. I'm done. I'm not a drug runner. I don't know why you're trying to tear my car apart." Mm-hmm. Well, I get a lot of drug runners through here, and I said, "Well, good luck catching them. I hate the bastards, you know."
Yeah.
So I wheeled off and left him, and was laughing all the way to Fort Worth. I thought, that's the stupidest deputy. I called him Deputy Dog, you know.
Oh my gosh! So, what would you have done if the game warden had showed up, or what was your plan?
I was probably going to be hassled 3rd degree. But I knew that was my only hope of getting let loose free, was just bluff my way out.
That was the only card you could play.
That was it. I played my aces all at once, and it worked. I got stopped with a 180-inch buck in Austin by a motorcycle cop, and I had 2 other racks there in the front seat. And I had them up front so I could just enjoy looking at them on my way back.
Yeah, just skull caps or with capes?
Just that sawed-off skulls.
Yeah.
And that motorcycle cop was so happy he snuck up behind me and got me going 10 over in the middle of Austin. He just kind of giggling. Mm-hmm. He's smirking, smiling, writing the ticket. I said, "What do you think about them deer horns?" He goes, "Don't care a thing about them." Stupid cop. And I said, "Well, that's a good one there, isn't it?" And he goes, "I guess. You say so." And he just kept writing and smiling. He thought I was just trying to act like it wasn't a big deal that he was giving me a ticket.
Yeah.
And I drove off from that guy laughing. I said, "Parks and Wildlife would have held a banquet in his honor for catching me too." And he didn't have a clue who I was, which was great. You know, I was glad of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know, I've had some encounters coming home with you know, some out of season. Me and that first cop got pulled over. We had 6 heads. We had that stuff, 2 backpacks and all those racks and capes with sand all over them, laying all over the bed of the truck. Mm-hmm. And we were in his brand new big red truck. Well, he didn't have the front plates on.
Yeah, because you have to have both in Texas.
We came up on a highway patrol. We got behind them. They started looking in the rearview mirror, and they saw no front license plate. All he had was paper tag on the back. So they slowed down. We go around them. They lit us up. So he said, "Stay in the truck. Let me talk to him." He gets out, and he goes back there. And they made him put his hands up over his head because he had a big knife on his belt. And they said, "Turn around." He pulled the knife out, and they said, "All right, show us your ID." Well, when he pulled the badge, it was over. And he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Me and my buddy been in South Texas hunting." He said, he's taxidermist. We're taking some of these back to be mounted. And he said, "All right, see y'all later."
Really? We
went right through that, you know. But, you know, that badge was code blue. It was over when he saw the badge. And, you know, then this guy started laughing, you know. I looked back there and saw him laughing. I go, "It's over now." He done showed him the badge. It
sounds like you had a lot of luck and fortune on all these close encounters.
Yeah, and there's a bunch more of them that I'm going to have to, write as I think back and remember them all.
Yeah. So one cool thing you were talking about in the book is, like you said, people were following your footprints and stuff. And what was a way that you combated people actually following your tracks? What did you do about that?
Well, over west in the Robert East and the Piloncillo, you leave a bad track in that red dirt.
Is it soft? Real soft dirt?
Yeah, it's a type of dirt that's fine, and it will make a good imprint of your boot sole, even dry. And so George and Dennis have been going over there, and they've been taking tote sacks and wrapping them around their boots and then duct taping them it'd still leave a mark, but you couldn't tell which direction it was going in. But I didn't like that. I said they could still track to you if you had to hold up in some heavy brush, and they'd walk right to you. I said, that ain't no good. So I got to thinking long and hard, and I thought up them mop bottom boots, and I thought of how I would attach them where I wouldn't have to they would have to undo that, cut it loose, and then put their boot on the next day, and then rebuild it, rework it on there.
Yeah.
I said, there's got to be a way where you can just undo your boot strings and get right back in a boot that's already got something. So I thought up them mop bottom boots, and I drilled them 10 holes in that sole, them combat boots, and I sewed it on their parachute cord, with a wire needle and all. And man, I mean, it saved our ass over there because Dennis was leaving a mark, and I saw it. We got seen, and we were being followed. And I got him in front of me, and I stomped all his marks with the mops and just erased them. Mm-hmm. And it saved us. We got in this heavy brush, and they were walking all around us. We could hear their clothes dragging off the brush. I mean, 10 steps or less. And I mean, we just had to stay face down with our, arms around our heads like this, keep the camo on our arms over our faces where they couldn't see our ears and anything. And they were right by us. They could have probably just nearly spit on us at one point. And you could hear them talking amongst themselves, and we couldn't move. We were stuck there the rest of that day till dark.
What trip was that? Did you guys take any big bucks on that trip?
Well, George killed a 20-point buck with 5 drop tines. I've got pictures of it. On the end of the right beam, it was broke off going up and down on the break. It looked like one of those deer that you see with the 15-inch big old club drop tine.
Yeah.
It looked like what broke off was one of those, like you see in Webb County.
Really?
Yeah, it was a big drop tine, broke off of it, and there was a point going up, or the beam going up on the break. There were both points broke off of it. Probably 15, 18 inches of bone broke off right there. Mm-hmm. And it was still close to 180.
Really?
Yeah, with all that broke off. Anyway, he sold that deer, traded it to have a couple of others mounted that were better looking bucks. But, that was George. But, it was a 2-day hunt. We were to meet him on the end of the second day, 5 miles north at the north end of the ranch. We went in on the south end of the ranch. But we had all that heat. We were surrounded, and, the next afternoon when it was quiet in this one spot, we didn't know we were near a fence line or anybody else. And somebody pops a shot 200 yards from us. Here comes the troops again, surrounded us again.
Who popped a shot?
Some other outlaw. We thought it
Really?
might have been George. But, man, when that shot was fired, they swarmed it again. Several vehicles pulled up, 4-wheelers, and men bailed and started working it, trying to find tracks. And I told Dennis, I said, I forgot one thing. He said, what? I said, a shovel. He said, what would you do with a shovel? And I said, I'd dig a hole and bury myself. I wanted to be out of that ranch.
Really?
I didn't want to go back. I never went back to the Robert East.
That's another big ranch that you guys were on.
That's about a 90,000 acre ranch over there.
Still by Kingsville?
No, it's west of Hebronville, 3.5 hours west of Kingsville. But I got to tell you a funny story if you want to hear a funny one.
Yeah.
While I was in on the war horse hunt, George Clifford, a buddy of his, big, burly, red-headed guy, I've hunted with him before in Kennedy, and that's another funny story. But anyway, they had a guy named Tracy, I believe, from San Antonio down there, and they went in on Robert East, and they left their backpacks at about 5 miles deep at a bump gate and some brush, and they split up. Clifford and this Tracy guy went one way, George went another way. This is when he used the alias. They rattled up 2 big 10 points on the first rattle. Killed both of them. So in no time, they were swarmed by men and surrounded, and they caught Tracy. Clifford took off running. He made it across the road, and he got in real thick brush, and he lasted the whole day without getting caught. George didn't know they'd been caught. They'd been pressured on, and one of them been caught. And so he's over there rattling, and he hears the brush breaking, and he thinks it's a big deer coming out of this thick edge. And so he picks up his rifle, and it's a game warden and the deputy sheriff step out, throw down on him with, what looked like automatic weapons. Drop the gun! I'm just a hunter. Drop the gun! He had it up, getting ready to shoot in that direction. Well, they got George within 10 minutes on his first rattle. They caught 2 out of 3 on their first rattles. All right? The signal was, when they came back that evening to the backpacks, they were to whistle, but if someone whistled back, that wasn't them. So when Clifford came back to the backpacks after dark, he was about 75, 80 yards from that bump gate in the packs, and he goes, and they whistled back. And he knew they weren't supposed to. And so then immediately headlights come on and they crank the truck and start running down there at him. They saw him. Jumped over in the brush on the north side waiting on him to get to him, and they skid to a halt. He'd already come back about 15, 20 yards and where they think he was, further back. And when they skid to a halt, he runs across behind the truck, leaving them thinking he ran to the north, and he went to the south, and he went about 6 miles to the road. And there was a guard shack. And when he came back past that little guard shack, this guy was there trying to stop him. Stop, wait right here, wait right here. He was calling out the troops. Well, Clifford had left all his camouflage in the ranch, his gun, his backpack, not his backpack, his other hunting-looking stuff. Took his boots off. I knew he'd left something else. He took his boots off where they couldn't match his boot to the tracks he'd left in the ranch. I mean, his daddy taught him that when he was a boy. These guys were second-generation outlaws, okay? He starts walking up the pavement. It's real cold. All he's got on is a white undershirt and jeans. And here comes the security for Robert Easton. One was a deputy game warden, and he had some other men with him. And they said, all right, Red. They started calling him Red because he had that old bright red hair and this big old burly mountain of a man. And he said, you might as well. We done caught your buddies. They've already gone to town, paid the fine, gone home. They're back in Kingsville now. And he goes, I don't know what y'all are talking about. He goes, I'm going to find your gun in the morning, Red, and we're going to make a case on you. You might as well admit what you did, and we'll give you a ride on into town. He said, I own that store up there at Rendell. And that's about 26 miles south of Hebronville. And he said, you're not going to use the payphone there. I've already closed the store down for the evening. And he goes, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And he goes, you might as well come on in a minute. So they pulled up beside him 2 or 3 more times while he was walking to Rendell, and then they blew him off and left, went home to get some rest. They were going to get his gun the next morning.
Yeah.
So he gets to that stop sign, and he hides in the bushes waiting on, first he was hitchhiking, nobody'd help him. So he hid in the bushes, and a flatbed truck comes up. When it stopped at the stop sign and took off, he ran and jumped on the back of that flatbed truck, and he got up under by the cab. There was a tarp. He pulled a tarp up over him, and he rode 26 or 28 miles to Hebronville. He's going through Hebronville on the back side, on the north side, fixing to come out. He goes over these railroad tracks, and it wakes him up. He fell asleep. He was so tired.
On the back of the flatbed.
Yeah, and it's freezing cold. Well, he beats on the back windshield, and they go, hey, get off the truck, So they stopped and let him off. He went over to this motel, and he got a room, called his wife in Kingsville, and said, get over here right now. I got to get down there and get my gun before daylight. So his wife comes over to get him, and he starts downing coffee, getting woke up good, gets a snack. And so when they're going south through Rendell, that little store set right off the intersection, and the light was on inside, and he said that deputy game warden was at the gas pump with the pump running in his tank. He was inside turning on lights and stuff. And he said he went down, got his gun, and he's coming back, and the deputy met him head on halfway to that stop sign, so Clifford couldn't resist. He pulled into that store, and there was this little old blonde girl in there about 17. She's working. He said, your daddy own this store? She said, yes, he does. He said, would you give him a message for me? He said, yes, I will. He said, tell old Deputy Dog that old Red got his gun out.
Oh, my gosh.
And she said, oh, I'm sure that'll make him real happy. Clifford couldn't resist. He just had to rub it in. Well, he beat him. He whooped him again, but that place was too hot. And I knew guys that killed Boone and Crockett monsters out of that ranch. But you're not going to get me back in there anywhere, anymore. But at that point, after an inside look, I said, I'll never be back in that Robert East. They can have that ranch. I'm not going back over there. But Clifford put it on that old Deputy Dog.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite stories I've ever had any of my outlaw friends tell me. That was a good one. Yeah, he went with me one time and Harry Riskin in the Kennedy. The day after I shot the freak, we went right back to that area and was going to try to find another monster. I told him how many big deer I'd seen in that area. It was a warmer day. They weren't coming to horns as good. And they were going to split up and go together. I was going to hunt alone. And I said, no, me and Harry were going to hunt together, and Clifford was going to hunt by himself. And we were going to meet up on a sendero that we parted at from Riskin's east side. And so I said, Harry asked me, he goes, has Clifford got a compass? I said, I don't know, let me ask him. I said, hey, Clifford, did you bring your compass? He goes, what do I need one of them for? He said, way I figured, the highway on one side and water on the two others. He said, you can't get lost.
Yeah.
He took a 3-yard step. The guy was a monster, you know.
Yeah.
But we met back on that Sendero, and, you know, I said, I'm thirsty. I'm going to get on back. We were just going to make a one-day hunt. It ended up being about a 2/3 of a day hunt. It got hot. I knew they'd shut down, and we were just planning on a one-day hunt anyway, so I went on back. I outwalked them and beat them to the risking fence line. But, you know, there was times that I would go with Harry and maybe one other friend, and we'd be back in town at 8:30 that evening, you know, looking at our big heads, eating a steak and potato that my girlfriend Betty cooked us.
Yeah.
I mean, we were living the life. You know, hunt the best place on planet Earth and then have a steak dinner by 8:30. You know, you could do that with him owning that property 7 and 8 miles deep. There's a bird nest on the ground. You know, heaven on earth.
So what are you doing to support yourself with this? Are you still just doing taxidermy?
No, I'm selling the book right now.
No, I'm talking about
back then.
Back then.
Oh yeah, I mounted about 1,000 quail a year for that big taxidermy.
Yeah,
and I'd do that in 6 months and hunt and fish the rest.
Really?
I didn't go down there to work, make money. I went down there to hunt. And then when I found that Gulf Coast fishing to be like it was, the surf, the bay, that's all I did. Mm-hmm. And when every year my boss knew when September 1 hit and dove season opened, I was gone. He hated it.
Really?
Yeah, he didn't like seeing me quit, you know, just lay off the job. But he you know, I was worth too much to him to get mad and fire me. You know, he knew I was going to hunt. You know, I said, Joe, you know I didn't come down here to make money. I come down here to hunt. Now, turns out I come to hunt and fish.
Yeah. That's funny.
He put up with a lot out of me, you know, as a boss. But this other friend of mine, Pat Lane, that's coming out with his book next, when it hit bird season, he'd come pick me up on his way home from selling his plant every day at 3:30 when he got off. By 3:45, we were on our way dove hunting. Yeah, man, we'd kill 70, 80, 90 birds a day between the two of us and pick every one of them. His mother being there stewing up a batch of, you know, smothered doves while from the ones we, you know, killed the day before while we picked the ones we just shot. I mean, South Texas is just, it's too good at hunting. You know, once it's September 1st, you hunt all the way into January or more. You know, you don't even look up.
Yeah. Do you think the hunting or the poaching that you guys were doing, do you think someone could do that today on a ranch that size, or you think no?
I've been asked this question before. I've been told it can't be done. Yeah. It could be done.
Think so?
You know, you could get caught too. Is it worth going to prison? No, because they'd put me in prison. I'm 65 next month. I ain't got time to spend 5 or 10 years in prison. I beat this cancer. I fought long and hard to do it and have any time left, quality or otherwise, to even live and do anything. And I'm not going to throw it away in a jail cell.
Yeah.
I ain't doing it. I ain't, like my old buddy Roy said, I ain't doing the deal.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like back then it was so little of a punishment that there's really, even if you get caught, there wasn't a big...
Right.
There's not a big disincentive to not do it.
What was funny was when I got caught, George said, I don't think you'll quit. He said, but I know it'll make you a better hunter. And I said, how you figuring? He said, well, the bucks that you normally have sneak up on you when you drop your guard and quit paying attention. He said, that won't happen anymore. Mm-hmm. He said, you'll be heads up for anybody tracking you or coming near your game or anybody walking up on you. He said, you'll see that big buck that you normally would let get away. And he was right. The year he got caught, he killed a Boone and Crockett the next year. The year Dennis got caught, his son killed a Boone and Crockett the next year.
Really?
They were on their toes more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made a better hunter out of both of them. He was right. But I quit. I had too much to lose. You know, at that point, I'd had enough.
Can you tell us a little bit about the buck you called the War Horse?
Oh, he was a beauty. Yeah, he was a beautiful deer. He had twin scissors on the back tines. Both those, one was an 8-inch point. I could pull a picture and show you, but he's in that book.
Yep.
But the fork on one side surpassed the next upright. It come off the back tine and it went past the next one a couple of inches. Mm-hmm. And both bases had finger-length spikes.
Really?
Yeah, beautiful. And, you know, twin forks, had another fork over here. But he's a 177 plus, nearly 178 buck. You know, I outsmarted that deer not once but twice. But I was by myself. It was December I believe the 4th. Yeah, it was December. No, it could have been the 3rd, but I think it was the 4th. I went from an area north of there straight down a fence line, open country, and hit the brush in the evening, late afternoon, about 4 or 5 in the evening. And they had cleared that fence line. It was a new fence. There was brush piles that they pushed live oak into, and there was a big stand of brush, and I really made a mistake by getting beside it, but I thought it'd make good cover, but it just happened to be that's where the deer came from. Mm-hmm. The bottom he lived in and guarded was just down below there, 400 yards. And I had a flex cord, curly cord onto my spotlight, wired into the motorcycle battery in my backpack. I want to do some night hunting. And so I'm tied to the pack. And I took the pack off, sat down, and I rattled. And I mean, just right up behind that brush pile and just stop. Well, he's looking at me through the brush, but I can't see him. I don't have a 100% guarantee it was him, but I know it was him in my mind because he was guarding that bottom below there. I know it was him. And while I was trying to figure out what to do, I wanted to get loose from the pack so I could step past that brush pile and peek through a hole or just see him as he left and try to get a shot. I knew it had to be a big deer. He just froze on me. So seconds turned into minutes when I reached in my pocket, got my knife out, cut that flex cord to free me from the backpack. And I took a few steps past him. When I got where I could see all the way around that brush pile, he was gone. I never heard him make a sound leaving. A big buck can do that. My little one will trample out of there and make noise. A big buck knows how to set his foot down on soft sand all the way out, and he left without making a sound. It wasn't windy. I could have heard anything at all, and he just disappeared. Well, I was sick. I went, that is a monster. So I made up my mind to just go right back up that fence line and hold in that brush and sleep there that night. And the next day I was going to go back after him and circle with the wind in my favor and come into that bottom at a different angle, and that's what I did. And I got down into that bottom, and I knew I was about 400 yards from where I'd rattled him up the evening before. And I hit the horns first time, nothing happened. And I hit them real loud and hard again about 2 minutes later and set them down. And as I was just starting to set them down, I could see him. He was just leaping these 20-yard bounds over knockdown, fall out of the treetops from hurricane years. And he saw me in midair. When he saw me in midair, I knew he saw me because he looked right at me and he just stuck a landing right behind another brush pile that knocked down. He was peering at me right through that hole. Man, I put the scope on him then. I'm on one knee, had a perfect rest, sitting against a big live oak. And I mean, we're eye to eye. I'm looking at him through the scope, and he's looking right at me. And I mean, I got to take the shot. He goes, he's gone. I got to take the shot. I followed down through his neck with the crosshairs, and I got where I could just see the shoulder area through the blur. He reared up on his back legs and then just shot out of there. And I didn't know if I'd hit him good or not until I got there. 60, 70-yard shot. I went on over there, and I went to where I last saw him, and I was expecting him to be bleeding more by then if he's bleeding at all. And it was just like you took a water hose and was blowing blood out of a water hose. Not one way, both ways. Every step. He leapt all the way out of there, okay? Every time his lungs exhaled, he just blow blood out both sides. 110 or 15-yard half circle, and there he laid. The bullet went in about as big around as nearly a 50-cent piece and came out a little bigger. High, on the rise, it went in on the rise, see, because that deflected through the brush pile and then turned, come up. And it went in at one elevation and then came out up closer to the back of the spine, It double lunged him, cut the artery under the spine because it was so high. Yeah. And that's where all that blood was coming from, so that artery blowing over into the lungs and him blowing it right back out the holes. It was one of the most gruesome, longest blood trails I've ever seen. I knew he'd be laying dead any minute at the end of it. When I saw him, it was no surprise. But I went up to him and started looking him over, and another nice buck came running up.
Really?
Yeah. That's how good the hunting is in there.
Yeah.
You shoot, and you get one down, and another buck had heard the rattle too, still on his way in. And they hadn't been used to hearing gunfire like that.
They didn't know what that was.
Yeah, except when those helicopters would get up and it scare them so bad, they go hold up and didn't tie the two together. But, a single shot like that didn't make sense to them. Been hunted enough to know.
Yeah.
That war horse, that's one of my prized trophies because I outsmarted him that second day. I know you couldn't tell me it ain't, and when I see God, I'm going to say I'm right about the war horse, ain't I? Yes, yep, that's the same buck.
That's funny. So what's out all these hunts you've been on? I think you said you killed 116 bucks, right?
We brought that many out of there.
Yeah.
I think I killed 73 of them, and that's not counting all the camp meat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I added up. Well, I put it this way. I listed a while back the ones that my 7mm 08 killed out of the 116, and that was 73.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a story coming here in Tarrant County that's real funny. Mm-hmm. You want me to tell that one? I
Sure.
will. Everybody used to say, well, you're not the king unless you're the king in your own county.
Yeah.
So one year, as it got close to fall, these buddies of mine started telling me that he was seeing 3 big bucks out here at this wildlife refuge west of Fort Worth up at Lake Worth. Between there and Azle, there's what they call the Nature Center. I would have never thought to go hunt there, but he said he saw this huge buck with 14-inch double drop rack, big beer can bases, multi-point handlebars, and another one with 1 drop tine, and another one with a real typical rack. And I thought, well, that's worth checking out. And the game wardens had been swearing they were going to get me. And I thought,
the Tarrant County Game Wardens?
Well, I was hearing about it. They said, we're going to get him this year in the Kennedy. We're going to be waiting for him. So I thought, what a beautiful thing to leave them sitting down there waiting on me, slip them a Mickey looking for me there, and hunt right here in Tarrant County. So I started hunting this buck. And the first time I went in there and jumped him immediately, and I was not expecting that. I didn't have my light tied on my gun yet. I went in about midnight. What I did was there was a bar across 199. It's called Pair of Dice bar. Mm-hmm. And I parked my old Coupe de Ville there, but not until I had dropped off my gun and spotlight on a little side road to this 200 acres next to the park. Okay, I knew they were cutting through that. Well, that's where I was going to enter, so I go in there, and I don't walk probably 400 yards into that property. I ran across the highway, got to my gun and all, backpack, got geared up and started in. I didn't have it wired on yet, and I was just going to assess the situation, maybe even leave my gear and make a recon look and then plan my hunts. I figured it was going to take me several trips, and it did. But what happened was I jumped this big buck point blank. I couldn't even light him up, but he had to be one of the big ones, probably the big one. The body on this deer was so big. I'm walking in at about 40 yards in the dark. I see this deer, and I go, there's a deer right there. And then I see it pay attention to me and throw his head up and immediately haul ass. And I was like, God, when he flashed and I saw the white flash as he wheeled, and this big old rooster tail come up, and I went, that was the big deer right there. I'd done blown it. I said, I've blown it. I won't get him tonight. Well, I walked around all in there that night, and about 5 a.m, I saw these 2 pair of eyes, and I said, I'm going to ground check one of them. One of them might be him, because there was supposed to be 3 together. Yeah. But I figured it's probably the lesser 2, because I thought I was convinced I'd seen the big one. So I shoot offhand about 115, 20 yards. I barely caught this buck in the sternum, but the bullet went all the way down, was under his skin by his pecker, when I found him. But I didn't find that deer the rest of the night. And I put my gun and backpack down in that 200 acres next door where I shot him, but the blood trail went across the Blacktop Road over into the park. So I was like, I got to find him, cut his head off, and run out of here. I ain't going to be able to cape him. I ain't going to have time. It was breaking light on me. So I'm on the blood trail for 500 yards. Steady, good, dripping blood trail. I'd slice the bottom of his heart or cut the wall of the heart, and he was bleeding. And the spleen artery, that low, I cut the spleen artery, and he was bleeding. And he bled out. And I found him after 20, 30 minutes after daylight. Well, I cut his head off and ran, all the way back and got out of there. It was a 13-point typical, about a 160 class buck. Well, that was a good deer and all, but it wasn't the one I was after. I was still after the big one, and I saw the single drop time buck 3 times other than that, and passed him waiting for the big double drop with both. That deer had a broke off drop. So I was like, he's a younger brother, and I don't want to kill him while he's young, and with a broke drop time, I'll leave him alone. I might shoot him in another 2 years or something, but I wanted the big deer. That's the way I always been. It's like, I go in a bar, I ask the prettiest girl there to dance. Well, when I go hunting, I want the biggest deer I know is there if I've seen him. And I was on to him, so I wanted him. And I didn't get a shot. I would light him up. One morning, I went in there and put 400-yard drip line of doe and heat piss. It was that old Get a Buck brand. And it wasn't even breaking light yet. And where I screwed up was I didn't have a black lens cover on the spotlight that was screwed on my gun. It was just light enough that finally, as he got about 35 yards from me, he was coming from drip to drip to drip of that doe piss. And I saw one of the big drop tines coming down over his shoulder, and I go, it's him. And I started up. Every time he'd move again, I'd start putting the gun up a little higher, and I got the gun facing him where he could see that reflector in that spotlight, and he spotted me and looked over there, took off, jumps big old high leaps and leaps across this creek and disappears in the brush on the other side. Well, after that, he really knew I was after him, so I was really having trouble spotting him again. And I walked upon him at night one night, and I could smell him real strong, these old pissy hawks. And I go, there he is, he's right here. And I heard the doe squirt, and I heard him squirt behind her. And I let him up, and he would run this way and that way and this way and that way and keep a tree between me and him, them cedars in that area. He was using them cedars to block my view. He was smarter than hell, smarter than any deer I'd ever been after before. And so I had a close counter with him then, and as he crossed one deal, I could see all the trash sticking out and the big old drops, big old fat bases. I knew he was exactly what the guy told me he was then.
Yeah.
I never did kill that deer, but I went on some morning scout recons, and what I did, that old Cadillac was quiet, and I drove right up beside this guy in an old blue Chevy truck, and he's sitting there with his motor running loud. He didn't hear my Cadillac pull up right beside him, and he had binoculars looking out into the buffalo pen. There was a high fence buffalo pen, about a 7-foot fence, and they kept the bison in there for people to look at traveling through the park. And he knew that big buck was back in there, and he had his glasses on him, looking at him back in the timber. And I couldn't see the deer, but those buffalo were right in front of his truck, too. And I watched him. I go, he's onto that big deer, and he's trying to get him out of here. I said, he's probably got a 22 in the truck. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I said, there sure are some ugly critters, aren't there? And he went through the cab of that truck. I scared the shit out of him. He had a guilty conscience, of course. And he felt like I was probably a warden or something at first thought. Well, then he looked at me and he goes, yeah, they're ugly as hell. And I said, yeah, have a good day. And I drove off, and I knew I'd wrecked him with the buck. Mm-hmm. Well, the rumor got out that big deer was killed.
Yeah.
And the game wardens thought I got it. Once they figured out through the grapevine that I was hunting that deer, they started watching it. And I quit hunting out. I did kill the single drop deer later, about midnight one night on a Friday night at midnight. I rattled him up and shot his ass, Mm-hmm. So I got 2 out of the 3. But I took that deer out whole. I wasn't going to let them DNA match me on that one, because I was going to probably show that head to some people. But what I did was I caped him off, backstrapped him, quartered him, left all the guts inside his rib cage, didn't bust him open any at all. And I just, first trip, I took the quarters from the backstraps and the cape and the head to the road about 2 miles away. Then I came back and I took that carcass and just shoved it down in my backpack with the neck sticking up out of it. Strapped him in, picked that up, carried that and my other gear out of there, and never went back. But, my buddy Big L came the next morning to see the head, and he looked at it and he goes, I was going to finish the story because this is a funny part. I walked across the highway to the Cadillac and circled around and came in on that side road, and I had all them quarters in the backpack with the carcass in it, and I just pulled that coupe de ville door open and threw that front passenger seat forward, and I started throwing quarters in the back seat of that old Cadillac right on the fuzzy seat, blood everywhere. And I mean, it was more fun than getting to do a double axe murder on both my ex-wives at the same time. I was laughing my ass off, threw it down in drive and peeled out of there and went out the back way. But my buddy Larry come over the next morning, he saw that rack and he saw that carcass in the alley, and he goes, you be a deer hunting motherfucker. But he said, now you're the king in your own county. You're the king now. Yeah, but I got 2 out of 3. But I'd give anything to kill that big double drop one, though. He was a King Kong buck. He was a gorilla.
Did you ever hear of him getting killed?
That one guy in that blue truck's who I think shot it.
Really?
I told the game warden this story. I told Larry Osborne. I said, I know who killed that deer. He said, well, we thought it was you. I said, I did not kill that big deer. I said, that guy in that blue truck is the one that shot it. It was a blue Chevy truck, an old one. It was one of them $100 trucks. When the law got severe, where they take your truck, when they made those confiscation laws, restitution, confiscate your vehicle, all that. When that went into effect, every outlaw in South Texas bought a $100 truck and a $50 gun they could throw away. He was working on that protocol. He had bought this old jalopy truck in case he got caught. He wasn't going to be losing much, when they seized it.
Right.
He knew exactly what he was doing. He was a Tarrant County local outlaw. I didn't know him, He was probably in his late 30s to 40s. Saw him that day. But when this all comes out, and when I tell that story in part 2, I'm going to say, all right, you know who you are. You owe it to me to show me that head. You have to come forward and take me to look at that buck. The one drop time was about 4 fingers wide, like a boat oar. It had a paddle to that one drop. That one was 2 inches longer than the other side. Had a 12-inch drop on this side, a 14-inch drop on the other side, with a big palmation. Parks and Wildlife should have some pictures of that deer. No telling how many people walking that park had photographed that deer.
Yeah.
I mean, surely somebody had took a good picture of it. He was crossing 199 to the south side of the freeway.
Yeah.
And spending summer times over there some.
You think he was a 200-inch deer?
He was a 195-ish deer. I don't think he'd go over 200, but he was scared the hell out of it. He was that big. Yeah, he could have went over 200. He was just everything you could ever hope for.
Yeah.
Now, he was the limit on what you can expect a whitetail to have.
Gosh dang. That sounds like an awesome buck. I didn't know you had any Tarrant County.
What had happened, I heard they stocked those deer to start with in the park. Parks and Wildlife did. All right?
Like genetics?
They starved to death. They had to take down the high fence on one side that joined that 200 acres private property. When they did that, big bucks were getting run over all up and down 199 towards Azle. Between Lake Worth and Azle, big bucks were getting hit every year crossing the freeway in the rut. Big deer, 165, 170-inch 10-point bucks. They just went everywhere when they let them out of the park. So I think it was a stocked genetics by Parks and Wildlife till they had to take it high fence down.
When you're in there hunting these ranches, what does a bag dump look like for you? What do you got in your bag when you're going on these 2-week-long?
Oh, my gear?
Yeah, what all kind of
gear? I had a little Teflon skillet that was ultra light. I had a metal coffee boiling pan to cook water in, and I made oatmeal. I fried oatmeal pancakes. I took a lot of Bisquick powder, to batter my meat with, and I take that Bisquick powder and mix a little of that with dry oatmeal, stir it up, and then pour scalding hot water in there on that and stir that into a dough, and then flatten it out between 2 pieces of plastic and fry it. Make an oatmeal pancake. Took a little honey bear and squeeze honey on that. That was my morning meal to get some energy, but I'd crack 15 to 18 eggs in a Gatorade jar. Just crack them and pop them and fill that Gatorade jar. I'd pour some pecani sauce in there and go ahead and add some salt for preservative. And I would scramble eggs. I had cans of Spam. I cooked and ate like a king the first few days until I started killing deer, hogs. And I fried hog nuts, javelina liver. Everybody that knows liver knows pork liver is better than any liver there is. And javelina liver is even better than that. I ate like a king out there. It's like fine cuisine in some New York restaurant. I mean, I'm a cooking dude, I know how to cook. But I took white gas stove. I had a little Optimus 123 stove about 4 inches tall. And a little old tank on it would burn 45 minutes full throttle. And I'd tone it down and cook at the right speed, and I could probably cook an hour plus. One time I cooked a bunch of turkey, and that thing must have ran better than 45 minutes by another 20 to 25 minutes. I throttled it down and just kept it at a low cook. Yeah. And I'd cook a batch, and I'd put some more meat in there, fire it up and cook it, cook the thighs, the drumsticks, slit in half. And that way I had my meat cooked up. If it was cool weather and I knew the meat would keep already fried, I'd go ahead and fry up a batch, I'd fry up a bunch of hog meat or a bunch of turkey, and then I'd carry it with me and not have to cook for 2 days.
Yeah.
A lot of times I'd go in on a hunt, I'd take a bunch of leftover barbecue, go eat a bunch of ribs and buy heavy and take some of that with me too. Just start eating cooked barbecue ribs, all us guys took good food, plenty of tortillas, one of the things I liked more than anything was some smoked oysters in a can. Okay. That was a treat. Corn nuts. You crave something crunchy to help brush your teeth.
Yeah.
When I went on the 27-day hunt, I didn't take a bath. I didn't brush my teeth the whole time. And this buddy of mine heard that. When he came in the taxidermy, I was at there in Fort Worth and met up with me. And he goes, "Man, I heard you had a hell of a hunt." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "You didn't take a bath the whole time you were out there?" I said, "No." He said, "You didn't even brush your teeth?" And I said, "No." He said, "Man, I bet your breath stunk." And I said, "You ought to smelled my ass." Yeah. They don't understand what that entails. A lot of people that never camp out, hunt out for any length of time, they go to their lease and they got some cabin there. Then they go 4-wheel to their deer stand, sit in it, and assassinate some poor deer eating off their feeder or food plot, and then call that hunting. They don't understand what I did.
Yeah.
It's a whole different level of hunting. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a step back 100 years in time.
Right.
I was getting a dip one time. I had this world-renowned hunting consultant with me, and I'd put dough and heat piss on this hocks in a Ziploc bag, hang them in a tree when I'd set up to rattle. And then we got ready to move, make another, cover another 400 or 500 yards before we made another rattle. And I got me another big old dip of Copenhagen, and I had that dough and heat piss all over my fingers.
Oh, no.
And he said, "You ain't even going to wash that dough and heat piss off your fingers before you get that tobacco in your mouth?" And I said, "Are you kidding?" I said, "That's what gives it its outlaw, authentic flavor." And he said, "You're the last of the mountain men, Charlie." He said, "You were born 100 years too late."
Yeah.
And he'd seen it all, hunting all over the world. But, yeah, I didn't want to ruin that authentic outlaw flavor on that hunt.
Oh, my gosh. How many deer did you end up taking on the 27-day hunt?
I brought 6 bucks out. Yeah. I was at this little lone Oakmont the last day, the whole day, watching the highway from about 500-600 yards off. And the weather hit again, which made me sick. I was like, man, I want to stay. And I was just fighting that urge to just turn around and go back and stay another week, because I had that set up with my ride man. If I wasn't there that night, he was going to come back a week later. So I said, I'm going to go back to the brush and hunt another week. That front hit, and I was sitting there just mad about it. But I'd ran out of all my carbohydrates. I had no more biscuit flour, no more oatmeal, no more chewing tobacco. I was gone to Red Men then, and I didn't have no more nothing, okay? I had white gas. I could have rendered fat off of hogs, but, had grease to fry with. But I didn't have any carbohydrates, and I'd already lost 26 pounds those 27 days. I found that out when I got out and weighed. I went in there at 194 and come out 26 pounds lighter, solid rock. Well, I was sitting there wishing I could go back and hunt when the weather come in on me that last day, and I sat there and I said, well, I'm going to just kill some time and look at my racks. Mm-hmm. I had 2 bundles of 3. So I got them loose on the straps, and then I just pulled them 2 bundles I had banded together with the strapping tape. And when I pulled them apart, they just went boosh. And a big 10-point just goes kaboosh, and jumps right in my face. I'd rattled him up just pulling them 2, $3 bucks in each rack apart. That rattled him up. That's when I really went crazy. I went, I'm going to go back. I don't care if I starve to death. And then I went, I cannot do it. I'm famished. I've got to come out. But, he wasn't quite a shooter, but he was a real pretty buck. Mm-hmm. He's a 5-year-old deer. But he just jumped in my lap just from the sound I made pulling them horns apart.
Oh, my gosh.
That's how game those bucks are. That was his home. Mm-hmm. He staked out that mott. It was about 100-yard circle of live oak. And that was his home. He heard that. Who's in my house?
Yeah. What's the biggest buck you ever took off one of the ranches? I
brought out 2 180s, but I'm not going to give away the stories on them yet because there's some extenuating circumstances to them that I want to tell in the book first. But one of them in particular. But I let a lot of deer over that get away. I was just all this storytelling lately has reminded me of bucks that I haven't written about yet.
Yeah.
And it's coming to mind, and I'm thinking, man, the people that I took with me cost me another 6 of the biggest deer I've ever seen, and I'm pissed about it. But it's like, hey, shit happens. You can't carry them all out. It's hunting. It ain't killing. It ain't shooting. It's not a shooting gallery. Mm-hmm. They get away, and the bigger they are, the more likely they are to be the one that got away. It happens. It's part of it.
I think in the first podcast you told me about a mainframe 10 by 10 or a 9 by 9?
The typical.
The typical.
Crockett. Yeah.
Is that the biggest deer you've ever seen?
That's the biggest typical by far.
Really?
He'd outscore everything typical I ever saw by almost 30 inches.
Would he have been a world record typical?
No, I think he was somewhere under or over 200. I know he was over 190. I know he was. He had 23 or 24 points typical. He had more than, all your fingers on both sides. I mean, when it came, it was blinding. You couldn't separate them in your vision to try to count.
Yeah.
It's too many. You couldn't even try to count his points. And they were perfect, just perfectly uniform. Every bit of that deer was matched equally on each side. I wouldn't be surprised if he had an even number of points. He looked that even. And instead of being 23, he was probably a perfect 24. I couldn't believe that deer. I'm going to end up getting God to show that deer to everybody for me to back me up on it because it was that big.
Yeah.
And his eye guards were about 10 inches. He had everything long. The beams rocking his ear and came all the way up to the top height of the points. There was nothing short. He was in his perfect prime.
Why couldn't you shoot that deer?
I had a Jeep pouring in on me. And then they parked right outside the mud on me, and he kept standing there, and I almost shot him.
Just because?
I went into a trance. I almost shot him. I was going to shoot. My spirit was saying, shoot that deer. And I took 2 steps forward, got on a live oak, and got squeezing on the back of his neck. And when the trigger collapsed, the next thing you hear when they do that, when they collapse, and I'd had that trigger worked on. I had that trigger brought down from 3 1/4 to about 2 1/2. And it was real sweet. You just barely start touching it, but you would feel it move before it went off. Well, it moved. It was fixing to go off, and I caught myself. And I said, you can't shoot that deer. They're right outside the mud on you. You're going to get your ass caught. You better get your shit together. And you've heard the rest of the story. You got it on that other interview. But to this day, that's the biggest deer period score-wise I will ever see. Typical. Yeah, I'll never see one like that again. I don't think anybody that lives in the state of Texas will ever see a deer that typical again. There was that big deer in Oklahoma killed recently that was a real big
Gunnar
typical.
Womack.
That Bo killed.
He went to the same college that we went to.
He looked like that with another point in between every one of them.
Really?
They were so close together. It's why I say fingers. They were this close together. The points on the buck I'm talking about were so close together it was like your fingers on your hand. And they were all 10 and 11 inches long all the way up. I never saw nothing like that. I never dreamed about a buck that big. I never thought I would see one like that in that ranch. I know where he lived. I know where. If I was to lease legal a pasture in the Kennedy, I've got 3 or 4 choices I would love to lease and hunt. But right there'd be one of them looking for that buck's descendant.
Yeah.
And if I had to farm him, so to speak, by passing him 2 or 3 years to get as big as that in age, I would. I'd let him get fully blown like his grandpa.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was in 1982. Yeah, December of 82. And so do the math. Every 7 years, there's been another one like that, give or take 2 or 3 years, taking his place. Because I didn't kill him. He's still there. His genetics are still there.
Yeah.
That deer's genes are still there. And all the deer I killed, they're still there. I never hurt that ranch. Out of all the deer I killed over that length of time, and the world-renowned hunting consultant with me, he knows a lot about management and all, and he told me, he goes, I wouldn't let him shoot all these 155 bucks he was wanting to kill. And he got mad, and I said, I don't care, you're not shooting them. Mm-hmm. And he told me, he goes, well, boy, you really do a good job of managing this ranch.
Yeah.
And, all the deer I killed were 7, 8. I killed 2 5.5-year-old deer. The double drop deer and another with 14.5-inch back tines and a unicorn point. I killed 2 5.5-year-old deer out of all my trophies. The rest were 6, 7, and 8, and John 9. I didn't take nothing out of that ranch. I didn't put a dent in it. All those bucks had already passed their genes for 3, 4 years running before I killed them. They're still there. Big John's still there. There's guys hunting that telephone pasture right now, legal, and they can't kill one like that. And they'll tell you they're hunting fence lines, feeders. They're not rattling it on the right day with the right weather and going about it right. Big John still lives in those woods. Those big deer are still there. They're just so smart now with all the pressure, I might not be able to fool one of them and get him to show himself. Mm-hmm. But stay hid. You're not going to get him out of the brush. You probably can't rattle those deer like you used to. It's a different ball game now. But that harsh weather's when they're stirring. You know, when it's in the 40s and 30s and it's cold and rainy all day, you kill those deer in the middle of the day. You kill them from 11 to 3. But you got to stay busy hunting all day to get one of them. They don't want to. Nobody wants to put that kind of effort in it. I was so crazy about them then. I outdid a lot of people with just. I loved it that much. I couldn't get enough of it. You know, it was just like some guy with a pick line. Morphine. Every time you wanted to hit a button and get another buzz, just get another bump, just hit the button. Every time I sat down to rattle, I knew there wasn't no telling what I was fixing to see. When you're on a place like that, where you know the very next rattle might be a 230 double drop, you don't want to sit still and waste your time. You'll kill your body trying to cover all the ground you can in an area like that to make it happen.
Right.
You got to do your part. I worked my ass off for all them deer. People think that poaching's an easy, lazy deal. I worked 100 times harder poaching than them guys did riding around in their trucks on their lease or their four-wheeler or they're sitting their deer stand doing nothing. Read a magazine, the one goes out in front of the feeder. That wasn't me. I was a hunter. I hunted hard. I covered a lot of ground. I walked hundreds and thousands of miles to do what I did. I earned them deer. I like to see them get their fat rear out of their truck, leave it at the highway, and do what I did. They come out there about 50 pounds lighter in a week.
What's the craziest non-typical deer you've seen on any of those ranches? Besides the Tarrant County buck you already talked about.
That was a good one. I think the best non-typicals I saw was on the King Ranch with George that night, spotlighting coming out. When we lit up that wad of 200 deer, and they was almost all bucks. They looked all bucks. There was 2 separate wads and a vacancy, between the 2 sort of at the back. I saw 2 bucks run off with what looked like 40 points. I can show you a picture of a 45-point buck that's in the Texas Big Rack book.
I think you sent me that picture before.
They looked like that. All the tines had trash sticking straight out. Like 4 or 5 fingers of it on every tine. And when I saw those 2 bucks, I started telling George, shoot him, shoot him, shoot him. He didn't see him. He was already zeroed in on this big old boat paddle eye guard on this 10-point right there close, and he shot him. But they were all starting to spook, and so he had to make a quick decision. But had he laid his eyes on the 2 I saw at the back of the bunch, he would have been shooting at them running. Mm-hmm. Those are the 2 craziest non-typicals together. They were smarter than all of them. They were staying at the back anyway, and then they hauled ass. Now, they were probably 250 yards running from us, but you could see all them points sticking out with that light on it. Incredible. There'd been heavy fog the night before, but it hadn't settled in again yet, and I got a clear look at them. I know what I saw. But, we stirred the hornet's nest. I had some friends that we showed those bucks to from that hunt. Mm-hmm. Go back out there and hit that food plot. They were waiting on them. They caught them. See, I knew better than to go back after leaving them 2 laying there. One of them had one back strap halfway out. I had laid him open, and I laid both back straps out to the side and was going up one, taking it off the ribs when I heard the plane come in over us. Mm-hmm. And that's the way they found them. They found mine with the head just cut off where I blew the neck open real bad. And then they found that one of George's with both back straps hanging out. And I already started, when I laid him back, I was caping him some on both sides. But I said, I'm going to go ahead and get them back straps out, stick them in the pack. And then we got interrupted with that plane. We had to haul ass. But, that, I imagine that had them hotter than, fresh on Fox and the Forest Fire. They staked that place out, and then these other guys from Bishop went in there and got caught. They were going to go light up that same big water deer I told them about. Mm-hmm. They said they were waiting on us. We shouldn't have went. Yeah.
Gosh dang. That's wild. So were you guys eating? I know you were eating some of them while you're back in there, but what are you doing with the meat on most of these deer? Are you taking the back straps and rolling, or some of them just caping? Well,
you can only eat so much deer meat in 2 or 3 days, and by then you're going to kill another buck. But what I found was I'd rather eat hog meat, so I wasn't too big on the deer meat. I'd get the heart, the liver, the underloins. I liked eating that. What I liked eating on the whole of things was the hogs, and what I liked was the ham of a 40-pound hog. I'd take the top of those hams off tender and marble in fat and just fry them up like pork chops. See, if you're consuming that marble fat, you're getting energy from it. It helps sustain your carbs. You know, you're getting some energy to run on. But the backstrap in a hog, unless you got a big thick fat on the back and you leave that there and eat that too, you're missing something that'll give you energy. You just go around eating lean meat, you're famished in no time.
Really?
Doing that, carrying that kind of weight, fighting that much brush in the terrain, the hills, the dunes, you burn everything you eat nearly. Yeah, people don't understand what a deal it is. It's an endurance challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's a marathon. I ought to tell that story. This is another funny one that involves Tarrant County, but I met this man, the world-renowned hunting guide consultant that I ended up taking. Met him on an out-of-season mule deer hunt at Marathon, West Texas, on a lease he'd had for a couple of years, but he wasn't going to have it anymore, so he wanted to shoot the place up on his way out. And he had this Chevy Blazer, two-tone blue and white, and he was going to drive that back to Fort Worth after this hunt. So my boss at the time, this guy on that traffic circle there, West Worth, he set it up, and we go. And I borrowed his dad's 240 Weatherby mag to make a long shot in that open country out there like that, left my 7mm in his shop. Well, we get out there, I kill a good buck. I made a 600-yard shot on him, but I broke his leg. It dropped so much at 600 yards. I thought he was 5. I didn't hold high enough and broke his leg, ended up getting him. And the consultant got one. Both of them were just good 20-inch inside tall bucks, good bucks. And my boss had a temper problem. Well, he was upset that we got bucks. He didn't get buck, and so he didn't want to stay. He wanted to come back and watch football with his dad. And I said, well, I'm not going back. Snow hit, and it was snowing like hell. And me and this guy wanted to stay and hunt. And I said, I'm with him. I'll just ride back with him in his Blazer. You can go on. And we got kind of in a fight. Well, he left. After he left, this guy looked at me, and he said, are you thinking what I'm thinking? I said, yeah. Yeah, he's liable to go turn us in. This guy had a temper problem. I said, we probably ought to get the hell out of Dodge. He said, I believe you're right. So we load all the meat. We had all the meat on them bucks and big mule deer bucks. I wasn't about to waste that out there with the vehicles to get it. So we fill the back of that Blazer with them big ice chests full of all that meat and the heads caped off. And that boss of mine must have ran into the snow and decided the same thing we did, because we got a motel halfway back around Cross Plains, and then we came on in the next morning. When we were coming in the next morning, we passed this hothead boss of mine. We just went on around him, act like we didn't see him. I was trying to get a guy down the neighborhood nearby that was training under us to give me his key, to get me in the building, to get my keys and my gun and all my stuff. I was going to quit this guy. I've had it with his temper. So we pass him, and we go to that neighborhood where this guy that had a key to the shop training under us, and he wasn't there. While I'm knocking on the door, I knew where he lived. I was pretty sure. This guy turns around, and I talked with the neighbors, and I said, this guy next door, the taxidermy kid learning? And he goes, yeah, that's him. I said, all right, well, he's gone. Well, just as soon as they shut their door, bang, I hear this guy back into this parked car on the side of the road. This truck, he just smoked it backing up without being able to see out that window, that Blazer and all that snow and everything. Mm-hmm. And so I went, oh, God. And I ran out there to the street, and he kicked it in the ass and came pulling up to me, and he goes, get in. So I knew we were going to hit and run and all that. So I go around and get in, and I go right, left. I'm directing him through that neighborhood because I knew where to come out at. And so I said, all right, left right here. And we're hauling ass. We're flying around all these streets. And we fly around this curve there on a building, but 377 south of the Weatherford traffic circle. And when we did, here's 2 Fort Worth cops sitting there in their squad cars, head on, talking to each other out the driver's side windows. And I went, well, this is it. I got away with all this shit I've done down in South Texas, and I'm going downtown in Cowtown, my hometown, right now. We got these 2 out-of-season mule deer, no tags, they're out of season. We're going down. They looked up at us, and they went right back to talking. We barely had enough room to get around them. We had no stickers on the window, yellow New Mexico plates on that Blazer. We stood out like a neon sign. I could not believe they hadn't already got an APB out on a hit and run on us. It just happened about 2 minutes prior, but called down to the station and they could have put out the APB. We should have been caught right then.
Yeah.
But they went back to talking. He goes, well, what do you think they were talking about? I said, probably deer hunting. So we go. I said, take me behind the shop to the alley. And we unload my buck, all the meat and an ice chest behind the dumpster and the head in the trash bag. And I said, now take me down to the bar, Circle M bar on the 183 down there. So he takes me down there and I said, all right, I'll call a friend of mine to come get me. I said, I want out of this vehicle. I mean, I was a nervous wreck. And I said, I'll tell you what. I said, it's been fun, it's been real, and it's been real fun. But I said, you're too hot for an outlaw like me. I said, good luck making it to Dallas. But he made it home without getting pulled over. But then he ends up going on a whitetail hunt with me. We went first over in that Piloncillo. Then the next year, we hunted the Kennedy on a 7-day hunt, got kicked out on the bay and walked all the way through the county. Hunted 7 days all the way to the highway and came out there. But, that guy loved to hunt as much as me. He's addicted to it. He hunted all over the world, know. And what was funny was when he called me that second year, I said, hey, what do you think? It was in the days of Tim McGraw, and he said, I like it, I love it, I want some more of it. That's the name of that story coming. Yeah. Well, this guy was a riot, We hit it off great, but he had 2 accidental discharges in that Kennedy hunt. The second one, I said, Fred, and he goes, somebody just shoot me. And I said, don't tempt me. The first time could happen to anybody. When it happened again, I got really mad. I mean, he could have shot me or his boy in the leg. Something could have happened. One of us could have got killed. You can't handle, you're a world-renowned hunting consultant. You can't handle a gun safer than that. Something ain't right there. He said, well, it goes off even when it's, he said, I got to put it off safety to break the bolt. I said, I wouldn't own a gun like that. Consequently, I do. But, that wasn't the one I was used to, To me, it ought to be against the law for any gun to have to be off safety when you break the bolt. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't be that way. There should have never been a law allowing them to be designed that way. They're dangerous. I've seen others discharged.
Yeah.
Guiding these kids and stuff with their parents down on that game ranch. And we've had guns go off there and blow a hole in the cab of the truck, shoot a hole in the side of the truck. You don't even want to turn around and look and see who's had their head blowed off when something like that happens. I hate being, I'm about through guiding and hanging around people that, don't know how to handle a weapon.
Yeah.
I could end up shot by one. Be the next Chris Kyle.
Oh, my gosh.
The game wardens might stage it, well, make it look like a Chris Kyle killing.
So for people that are looking forward to part 2, I mean, all of the YouTube comments we got are people looking forward to part 2.
Oh yeah.
They want to know. I mean, what can we expect for?
Yeah, I'm hoping to have it by Christmas now. I've just got to see how this surgery goes. That's standing in my way, And I've just been to the doctor last week about it. And, the plastic surgeon's the one going to have to do it. But he's acting like he's got cold feet and he wants all my records, and I need that behind me. If I don't get any action out of this surgeon, I'm going to be able to go ahead and complete it. I'll worry about this area last. I'm trying to get it behind me, but if I can't, I will be able to get the book quicker. I'll be able to finish it quicker. In the meantime, they need to get ready to get my buddy's book before the stories are lost.
Yeah, for people looking out, what's your buddy's book that's coming out?
It's the same sort of deal with a whole lot more history of South Texas.
Really?
With him growing up down there. It's going to be an interesting read for me because he knew a lot that I didn't know, from him growing up down there. That's the name of the book, Before the Stories Are Lost, and it'll be out in about 3 more weeks. Yeah. He's got it at the printers now.
Cool.
Yeah. No, I mean, anybody that liked my book will love his too. Yeah.
So what kind of stories are we looking at in part 2? Just a bunch of more outlaw hunting stories?
Yeah, and then my spiritual aspect of it all. I've got a heck of a testimony. You could say it another way, but it's bizarre. It's twisted. It's going to be mind-boggling. People are going to go, unbelievable. I mean, when they see that part, That's the purpose behind the book anyway. The storytelling, the hunting. The Bible says a man's gift makes room for him. I've got a testimony that needs to be heard. And this is my way to get everybody to hear it. That's simple. I've got a large audience already, and it's getting bigger by the day. And it'll be enormous once I unleash part 2. It's going to blow wide open. I'm telling you, there's some shocking stuff in it. Really shocking. And America needs to hear it. And they're fixing to. It's going to happen. But I've had no control over it taking this long. I just think that's the plan and timing of God, He didn't want it all out sooner.
Yeah.
It's going to come out when he wants it out, and I think it's around the corner, So everybody needs to get ready. It's going to be one of those fasten your seat belts, prepare for liftoff. A guy said it best one time. He said, man, that sounds like it's going to be hotter than Harry Potter. That's about right. That's about right. That's pretty close. It's going to be double time. Nobody's going to be expecting this. So I'm going to leave it at that.
So after these 22 years of outlaw hunting, is there any part of it you regret or?
Not at this stage. I mean, I'm done. I wouldn't do it again.
Right.
Because it's not worth the risk to me. I'm not going to jail over it. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend anybody stick their neck out over anything that would carry a prison sentence.
Right.
Because that's what you're looking at. When they first changed the law, I heard a story that these guys from Colorado thought Texas was easy. Colorado had stiffer game laws than we had at that time. Well, then we get tough. Well, we didn't notify everybody in other states. Here comes these Colorado guys down to West Texas and did what they've been doing. They lit up West Texas, killing all these mule deer. Well, they got caught, but they got caught under the new law. They had wives and families and jobs, and they're stuck down here in prison. They wrecked their whole life. Now, the only one I've ever heard got it worse than that, this guy was hunting South Texas, and he decided to go across the border and chase the girls. Well, he gets over and gets in a fight and goes to jail for 6 months. They took his truck. They, took his boots. They let him out 6 months later. He said, "Where's my truck? Where's my boots?" They locked him back up another 6 months. His parents and wife and kids and all were gone on with their life. They thought he was dead. They had him legally declared dead. They didn't know what happened to him.
Really?
Yeah, and he comes walking back across the border when they let him out that second time. He shut up. He didn't say nothing. It destroyed his whole life. All just to go over there and sneak in a little time with the girls and shit. That wasn't worth it. That's about what you're going to do to your life right now if you get caught poaching. You're going to shit can everything about your life. You'll lose your wife, your kids, your job, your car, your boat. You lose everything you got. That ain't worth it. If you're going to risk that, go after an armored car with 3 or 4 million cash in it. That's what I got to say.
Yeah.
But I got, looking back, it's like a lot of fond memories. I've got some bad ones. But, I regret those bad ones. I've got some bad memories. Life shouldn't have treated me the way it did, but it did.
Yeah.
Hey, rain falls on the just and the unjust. I've had my share of ups and downs. But when you look at all the good times I've had, there's no comparison. If I could do it all over again and go through the bad to get to do all the deer hunting, I'd do it again.
Yeah.
If that's what you want to know, yeah, I'd do that again. I'd take the hits and the heartache and all the downtime. Even this cancer. This cancer's on top of all the bad that was already in my history. All right? That wasn't fair. It kind of unbalanced it some. But going forward with some money to hunt legal, that's going to make it up to me. The cancer will come and go. It's going now. It's almost gone.
Yeah.
But I had to stay in the game. I couldn't let that win. There's a whole lot about this too. There's a lot of untold about the cancer itself and what actually happened to bring it on into a fully aggressive state that I'm going to tell in part 2. It's also part of my testimony. So I can't explain any of that without going into it for another, you take days to explain that, but I'm going to write about it briefly in the end of the book. They're going to understand what happened there.
Well, that sounds good. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I'm getting where I'm having more fun telling the stories. It seems to mean more to people to hear it told live than feel the drama and the emotion and all the intensity, on a podcast than just reading.
Yeah.
I hit this beautiful girl up a couple of days ago. I said, hey, how about a free copy of my book for being so beautiful? She's a huntress, heavy duty here in Texas. I think her title is Texas Huntress. And she said, I very seldom get time to do any reading. She said, but you need to make a movie out of that.
Yeah.
I hear that all the time. I think it's going to happen.
Is there any plans on it right now?
Nothing. I ain't got no call from the Eastwood Studios yet, but, after part 2, I see that happening. I really do, because I know what's coming in part 2. Other people don't. That's the movie deal. That's the part that makes it a movie. This stuff here will make newspaper stands, but that will be the crust of a movie potential. It could happen then. Once part 2's out, I expect something like it'll start cooking. If they think that already, I guarantee part 2 will do something like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that. I'm along for the ride. Just see how far God wants to take my story. It's my ticket.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Where can people get the book?
Right now, you just need to call me. I still don't have my little office finished, and my computer hooked back up, so the website's down. I haven't even been able to tweak it and tell people I do have the reprint. But you can call me at 817-648-8098 or Gmail me at 56charlesbeaty@gmail.com. And I'd be glad to mail one out. But, right now it's just mail-in orders,
Yeah.
Checker money order, and I send them right out.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, Christian. I'll be back.
We're going to be back with part 2.
I'll be back after part 2. I guarantee it. It's going to get hairy.